Let me extend another very special welcome. I usually say warm welcome, but the sky is about to burst open and the rain will be falling soon. So it's not so warm here in Jamaica. Nevertheless, I'd like to say a very special welcome to all our attendees in this afternoon session. The session today is entitled Project Management for Creatives, and it promises to be a very exciting session. Our facilitator, Elize, is here and she's ready and raring to go. But before she does, and you could see that thumbs up there just now, right? But before she does, I want to just take care of some administrative matters and what I like to call rules of engagement prior to starting this session. Just to tell you a little bit about this initiative, the Caribbean Creative, Fresh Milk, and the American Friends of Jamaica partnered to bring this very exciting opportunity to creatives across the Caribbean. The initiative is called Catapult, and in the Catapult program, we have 6 initiatives. And one initiative is the digital creative training. Now, the digital creative training is a training program designed to help creatives across the Caribbean navigate the digital space in these very challenging COVID times, as well as to help with increasing their presence and earning potential as we continue to navigate this space. I'll tell you a little bit more about the programs that we offer in the session or in the digital creative training program. And if you haven't already done so, we encourage you to go over to our website and to sign up for sessions. We still have a lot of space and seats available for other sessions. The sessions so far have been wonderful. They've been packed with information. They've been engaging, and persons have been giving very positive feedback on the sessions. So I want to encourage you all to head on over to our website and to register for some of our other sessions. Now, if you'll allow me, I want to share my screen. And here I'd like to take us through, as I said, what I like to call rules of engagement. So you might notice that your mics as well as your camera is not enabled, right? And this is so that we can have a smooth flow in this afternoon's session. But you know what? Very important to the success of this training is your ability to ask your questions and to put comments as well. So we are going to use a combination of different features to do just that. So although you will not be able to speak in the first 3 hours of this session, you can raise your hand. You can put your questions and comments in the chat section as well as in the Q&A section, all right? And we will from time to time check in and read your questions. Our facilitator will give the appropriate responses to those questions and so forth, right? Also important is your feedback on this training. We have been delivering these sessions for the last 2.5 weeks. Your feedback is very instrumental to us continuing to improve the delivery of these sessions as we bring them to you. And so we are going to solicit your feedback at the end of the training on the things that went well, the things that didn't go so well, so that we can continue to improve in that space. And so at the end of this 3-hour session, I will drop a link in the chat and that will allow you access to the feedback form. Equally important is the quiz that will be administered at the end of the session as well. And it's a short, tiny quiz with very easy, very easy questions, right, Elize? So we want to encourage you to go in and to answer the questions that will be on that quiz. Similar to the feedback form, I will put a link in the chat that will allow you to access that the quiz. At the end of the 3-hour session, and just so you know, we will be taking breaks. When Elize gets on, takes over the session, she will advise you at what point the breaks will be and so forth. So you'll have that information shortly. But at the end of the 3-hour session, we open up this session to what we call a networking event, right? And this is where we have the opportunity to actually speak. Your mics and your videos will be enabled. The facilitator will continue to be in the session, so you'll be able to engage her in this way. And you may also find very useful the opportunity to network with other attendees in the session. There could be persons in the session that you may need to continue to engage and to share with. And so this is a great opportunity to do that. And then finally, well, not exactly finally, because I do have 2 other things that I want to share with you. But at the end of the session, we will be issuing certificates, right? And that's why we want to encourage you to make sure that you do the quiz, because doing the quiz will determine the type of certificate that you get. So we encourage you to go and do your quiz so that you can have one of those nice fancy certificates and so forth at the end of the training. And finally, before I hand over to Elize, our facilitator for this afternoon, we want you to have fun. Nobody says training is boring, right? And it doesn't have to be. And we know that from the other sessions that we've had some really great, engaging, amazing sessions. And we anticipate that today is going to be no different. So we want you to have fun. We want you to put those questions in the chat. We want you to put your comments, because this is how we understand what you're thinking, and we'll be able to answer any questions that you may have. And so at this point, I want to hand over to our very able facilitator, Elize, who will tell a little bit about herself before she actually starts the session. Elize, over to you.
Good afternoon, morning, evening, everyone. It really is a pleasure to be your facilitator, trainer for this session today. And thanks so much, Jackie, for doing all the housekeeping. And I really hope that I can live up to the bar that has been set by my fellow facilitators over the last 2.5 weeks for this really amazing program. If I'm going too fast, anyone, or you're not hearing anything, we do have tech support on the sessions call. So definitely drop something in the chat, letting us know if I need to slow down, or if you're not hearing, or if we have any other challenges that we need to address. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can get started, and I'll go through a little bit about me and what we're going to be digging into for today's session. All right, so let's do share screen. All right, so if anybody isn't seeing my screen, please drop a line in the chat, and Jackie will let me know what challenges we're having. So as you all know, we're here for project management for creatives today. And I really am looking forward to going through my own experience with project management, because what I do is work with creatives. I'm a creative myself. I would say that I've been managing projects for over 20 years, and I still consider myself a relatively young person. So you might want to compute that, but ever since, primary school, I started off doing things. In school, I definitely was always in leadership roles. And I think that really assisted me in developing my skills for organizing events primarily. And as I got deeper into my career, projects and programs to a larger extent. I'm currently the festival director of New Fire Festival in Trinidad and Tobago, which is where I'm based currently. That may change over the next few months. But we have been doing the festival for the last 5 years, and that really has been one of the more challenging and rewarding projects that I've worked on to date. I've also worked with people like Three Canal, for y'all who might know that band in the Trinidad and Tobago, and I've also worked on some transnational projects. So my background is in fashion design, so I'm coming from the perspective of being a practitioner myself. So, expressing creativity is part of who I am. and I love working with other creatives. I love bringing ideas to life. I've also worked at the Ministry with Responsibility for Culture in Trinidad and Tobago. I was there for 7 years, again, managing projects and programs. And currently, I'm also a director of an NGO, which is the organization that hosts New Fire Festival. So really bringing all of that experience to the fore when we're talking about project management, but specifically managing projects in the creative and cultural industry. So very quickly, getting used to the virtual space still, I'd love to hear where all of our attendees today are from. So if you could just drop a very quick, line in the chat letting us know which island or which country you're coming from, so that if we need to tailor anything, we know how to make those references. So I'll give you, let's say, 3 minutes to get that done. I don't want to give you too much time. So 3 minutes. All right, so lots from Jamaica. Somebody made sure to say they're from Kingston, Jamaica. Thanks, Glendon. We have Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago. Hi, Leslie Ann. Right, we have a couple here from Jamaica with Imani from Bahamas, Kingston, Jamaica, Jamaican. So we have a lot of Jamaicans in the house. And I have a soft spot for Jamaica. I've been there. My brother used to live there. Beautiful country. I mean, the entire region is beautiful. So we have Jamaica well represented, the Bahamas, TNT, Barbados, and I'm sure we'll have some other folks joining us as we go. Repping St. Vincent, currently watching in Barbados. Lovely. Hi, Tanya. You're welcome. All right. So we know that we have various countries from the region represented. And I think that was important to know because community is very important. You may be working on projects in your local community, your national community. With COVID, we all have to be thinking regionally, which is my belief. And then we also have to see what opportunities for cross collaboration is available across borders. So we have somebody, Annette from Chicago. She's originally from Barbados. Welcome, Annette. So really excited to have all of your perspectives from around the region, because whilst we have a lot of similarities, there are also many differences when it comes to implementing projects based on legislation, culture, etc. All right? So let's take a look at what we'll be covering today in our time together. So we have 3 hours together. We lost a little bit of time, but we'll make that up. And I definitely want to make sure that we're also discussing and fielding questions throughout these 3 hours. So we'll start off with what the nature of project management is and the project life cycle. And then we'll have an activity where I want to get some specific feedback from you. Then we'll go into project management tools and techniques. And remember, a tool is only as good as the person wielding it or the team wielding it. So we'll look at advantages and disadvantages of what might be out there. And then we'll do another activity. The activities, we'll give you 5 minutes for those so that we're not, slowing things down. And then we will have a break of 10 minutes. And then we'll go into our hour 3, our final hour together, where we're looking at a case study. It's actually going to be my festival, New Fire Festival. And we'll look at different considerations for implementing successful creative projects. And then I want to open the floor for your final questions, comments based on what we would have covered today. And then any specific questions you may have on past projects and projects that you're currently involved in or things that you're conceptualizing for the future. All right? So what is a project and why do projects need to be managed? Why are we here today learning about project management specifically for creatives? Well, according to Write.com, we have a project that is a series of tasks that need to be completed in order to reach a specific outcome. So we have to be very clear that a project is a finite thing. It has a beginning and an end, and there are tasks in between that need to be completed in order for a project to happen successfully. So a project is not a program or an ongoing initiative. So that's something that I think we have to, be very clear about in doing our work, because sometimes we look at programs and think they're projects or vice versa. Whereas we're looking at the scope of a project being a very finite thing and having specific tasks that need to be completed. And that's going to be important for some of the other things that we get into today. So managing a project or project management can be defined as the actual process of creating, organizing, and executing a plan in order to meet specific goals. So we have a goal in mind. We've thought about what gaps or challenges we need to fill or meet, and we've come up with this project. Managing the project means that we're looking at the successful implementation of all those tasks to meet the goals that we would have set when conceptualizing the project. And these definitions were taken from a site called write.com. You'll notice that it's highlighted in blue. So you will get this slideshow sent to you as a PDF where this will be highlighted. And I do encourage you to go onto that site. It's been a fantastic resource for me, and do some additional reading, digging more into terminology, methodologies for successfully managing projects. So we have some project examples here, and I know because I would have gotten your information before we got onto the call that we have persons from around the region and from many different sectors within the creative and cultural industries. So you can have very simple projects. To me, hosting a meeting is a project. You need to get people there, you need to have an agenda, and there are outcomes that you're trying to deliver by having that meeting. So simple project. Then you can have complex projects where you may get funding from, let's say, a UN organization for something that's going to happen over 3 years, where you need to work with teams in various countries around the world. That would be a more complicated project. But all of those things would follow similar characteristics if we know how to break things down. Hi, Natasha, welcome. So staging an art exhibition or play, hosting an academic conference, book launch or runway show, and creating a film, online workshop, or music festival. All of these are examples of creative industry projects. And I'm sure that you've worked on many more types of projects. I hope that you see the activities that you do as projects by the time we finish this session, and your ability to break those projects into different elements to more successfully manage them is really what we're trying to achieve by sharing this information. And again, if you have any questions, if I'm going too quickly, definitely put a comment in the chat so I know to slow down or I know to go back. We can facilitate that. All right, so you heard me using the word elements a lot. And for me, what has really helped with managing my project successfully is taking things in bite sizes, being able to look at the whole and understanding that that whole is made up of different parts. Personally, I believe that the elements of time, cost, and scope are really the 3 essential elements of project management, but you'll see according to this diagram that there are many more. So we have quality, we have risk, which is something, it's a word that we don't like to use a lot, but it's really critical as project managers that we are looking at the risks associated with doing a project, doing any activity, and how we can turn those risks into opportunities, which is another element, and what may be required to mitigate those risks. And we'll talk about risks as we get later on in the session. We also have human resources, and all of us know that it takes people to get things done, even if you're using digital tools, even though we're working virtually most of the time now due to COVID. People are what makes projects happen. So if you're not managing your team, your stakeholders, your funders, members of the media, members of the general public effectively, that can have a negative impact on how well your project is going to be implemented, whether you're going to succeed. You also have asset versions. Now, again, some of these terms may or may not be applicable, but I felt it was important if we're talking project management for you to know what some of the lingo is. And again, you're going to be getting this PowerPoint presentation so that you have this as reference, and hopefully you're able to, use some of these terms in your work going forward if you haven't done this already. All right, so it says here it's necessary to avoiding misunderstanding along the way. It's also important to understand what your organization, team, what you yourself as an individual can bring to a project that can be leveraged when we're talking about assets and asset versions. All right, we also have productivity. Of course, we have to be looking at how well we are meeting our key performance indicators, KPIs, which we will get into later on as well, defining that. So if we have set certain milestones, are we meeting those milestones? Because this is how we're going to be reporting on the project, how we're going to be evaluating the project, and if the project is going to be replicated or scaled up, it could really affect buy-in from stakeholders, financing, if we're going to funders, they want to see how well you are doing in terms of your productivity. Some funders get very involved in the project management process. They may even have a member of your team, a member of their team, sorry, join your team during the management of the project to make sure that goals are being met. So you need to understand how you're going to use your KPIs, your key performance indicators, to really reflect your level of productivity and how that can be communicated to your various stakeholders. And then you would have additional measures that may prove useful. So things that you need to consider based on the specific nature of your project. So again, the success and quality of a project is heavily determined by how the time, budget, scope, and human resources are managed. And we'll get into getting some of your feedback on how well these things have been managed in your own projects in the past, or what do you see as some of your major challenges going forward as a project manager or leader of your organization. All right, so we all know again, every group has its own quirks and unique concerns, especially because people are what makes things happen. So we have to take these quirks, these idiosyncrasies, these, eccentricities into consideration if you're going to be an effective leader. And I thought this was important to mention because a lot of the time, especially in smaller organizations, if you're working on a project as an individual, let's say you're doing an album launch and you're a musician and you're doing most of it yourself, or any other creative project, you are the leader. And the project manager tends to be the leader of the project, making sure everything is happening according to plan. If you're not the actual project manager, you as a leader in your organization or the person wanting to see this project happen is going to have to be working with the project manager as well, and leadership also comes into play there. So we definitely need to be looking at effective leadership and how managing creative projects in particular require empathy. So understanding what your team members are going through, looking at what your other stakeholders are expecting of you and of the project. So that's really important. Having outstanding communication skills is critical, and proper management tools. And as I mentioned before, a tool is only as good as the person or the team wielding it. All right, so we'll get into some of the tools that are available. I would have really identified some free tools because there are a lot of tools out there. Some are paid, some you have to pay for, some are free. And I chose to focus on the free tools because we all know with managing creative projects, funding usually is one of our challenges. All right, and again, the quotation would have been taken from write.com, which you can click on this link and go to for additional reading and lots of amazing resources. Okay, so we went through the project elements and then we are looking at the project life cycle. So as I started off by saying, for me, really what project management has been broken down to in my own work is looking at that big picture. What is it we're trying to achieve? What is the vision that we're trying to implement? And breaking that down into various elements. And those elements tend to follow a life cycle that is similar by and large to all projects. All right, what will change would be the details in these phases based on the nature of your specific project. So projects start off by you conceptualizing what you want to do. What is the gap that you've identified that needs to be filled? What is the challenge that has to be met? What problem has to be solved? And once that conceptualization is done, once you have that idea, we're looking at initiating. So talking to members of your community, bouncing it off of family members, members of your team. Is this something we want to take on? Is this something I can do? How soon do I want to see it happening? How much is it going to cost? And those kinds of things are where you start initiating a project. So people think a project starts from the first meeting. No, it starts from having the idea and you starting to develop on that idea and figuring out, can this really happen? Does it make sense? Am I going to be paid for it? All those questions happen at the start of any project. So underneath the illustration, you'll see some terms, and some of them I will define in the next slide. So in this first phase of the project, we have coming up with your project charter and then project initiation. So we're already starting to get some terminology in terms of the tools that can be used in making sure that you have your documentation set and that your project is going to succeed. All right. Definition and planning. So we would have mentioned scope as one of the three, I believe, one of the three critical elements of implementing a project. And to me, scope has been really, really important, particularly in creative projects, because by their very nature, creatives, we want to do as much as we can do. So we have an opportunity and we want to heal the world. But it's really important to understand that the resources you have are finite. The problem that you've identified, big or small, needs a particular approach, so that in developing your scope, we want to be very realistic with what we can achieve given the time, the funding, the human resources that we can mobilize or that we have been provided with. Because there will be some projects that you are building on your own from the ground up, so that you're going to, potential donors asking for funding, you're going to various persons getting buy-in, and then there are some projects that you might be hired to work on or to lead. So the situation will change depending on, whether you're doing it yourself, you're contracted to do it for somebody else. But again, that scope is really important, because we can have something called scope creep, where you would have defined a project and then you have all these additional things being added, and that affects your quality, because you can't do more with the same budget, for example, or you can't do more with the same people. And if you can, it means that everybody on that team is going to be a lot more stressed, which I'm sure has happened to all of us, and we can relate to, and we see how that affected or can affect our projects. Under this phase, we also have something called a work breakdown schedule. Again, I'll be defining that, which for me has been really helpful with identifying what everybody has to do within a project, what role does everybody have to play. And it helps you as a project manager, the leader, really keep things on track when it comes to following up with persons about, what their responsibilities are. I'm sure most people have heard about a Gantt chart. Basically, that looks at your flow according to time and tasks, and that helps to keep things on schedule. And there are different tools out there for doing a Gantt chart. It's not absolutely necessary, but it really depends on what tool suits you best, and we'll get into determining how to choose which tool and which technique is best for you and your team when you are managing projects. Your communication plan is also very critical at this point, and I'll just like to say here that when we talk about communication plans, people sometimes think, okay, that's only marketing or that's only promotion. Communication also has to include your team members. So how are you going to be communicating with the members of your team effectively? I have seen in projects where information is going out to the public before members of the team, the project team, know what's going on, and we definitely don't want that. So some of the tools, some of the apps, the project management apps that I will show you examples for, will talk about how we keep our teams on the same page, how we effectively communicate with our internal stakeholders, which would be our team members, and then how that extends to how we are sharing information externally. And then again, risk management. We have to be thinking about what can negatively affect our projects and what we will do to mitigate those risks and turn those risks into opportunities. All right, so that was phase 1 and 2 of the project life cycle. We go into phase 3, which is the launch or execution of your project. So you want to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time in phase 1 and 2 to really go through all of these different elements as illustrated here, so that by the time you get to the launch of your project, you have things sorted. You have your team on board, you know how you're going to be managing communication, you've thought about the risks, you've thought about what needs to be done to mitigate those risks, and you have a tool in place that is going to help you track the productivity of all members of your team, as well as persons external to your team that affect the implementation of your project. All right, so in this phase, we're looking at status and tracking. We're looking at being able to determine how well we are meeting our objectives based on our KPIs, which are key performance indicators. You set your goals, you set your targets and milestones, and when you launch and you're implementing, you're now able to track how well you're doing against those indicators. The quality of your project, we need to be looking at that as well. Are you meeting goals in a way that you can be proud of when you are evaluating the success of your project? How do we determine success? All right, and being able to do forecasts. So you're basically in the middle now of the project life cycle. How are we going to determine, are we going to meet our goal in the final analysis when we have to do our reporting? Are we going to be able to say that we delivered? All right. So again, if you have any questions, if you need to slow down, if you need to go back, please drop a comment in the chat. All right. Then we have performance and control as our phase 4. I'm going to say here that I tend to call this monitoring, and you'll see that term being used, in various spaces. Industry standards, that term is fine to use. And please take note of that, because that's going to come up later, hint, hint, when you need to do your evaluations for the session. So for phase 4, monitoring is what I would call it, and what, by industry standard, it is termed as well. Here it's listed as performance and control. And basically, we're looking again at our objectives, our quality deliverables, cost tracking, which is important throughout the entire project. As we know, you don't want decisions that have been made at the start of the project, promises that are made to people, to come back and bite you, when you're trying to wrap things up and when you have to do your reporting to your donors. And then looking at performance, looking at productivity. There's a whole science behind how projects can be evaluated, how they're monitored. And I think one of the things that we really fall down on in the Caribbean, and particularly in the creative and cultural industries, is data tracking, really looking at how we can accumulate data, how we can get feedback from our project stakeholders, our team members included, that will assist us in doing better on our next projects, or will assist us at least in our reporting. So things like questionnaires, things like surveys, things like, the apps that, you decide to use, if you decide to use them, how you can look at your project documentation to ensure that you are able to track, based on your objectives, how well you're doing in meeting those objectives. And then our 5th phase, we have the close of our project, where all the bills are being paid, you're able to sign that final check, you submit that last report, and then you do a debrief with the relevant project stakeholders. There's also a term here called a project punch list. And basically what that is, which really we shouldn't be doing that, but in some cases it's unavoidable. A punch list is where you provide a document that says to your client or to your team, what was not able to be achieved during the lifespan of the project. So as far as possible, we don't want to be, dealing with any punch list, but in certain instances where a risk may have affected the project, COVID-19, for example, things may not have been able to be delivered, which you may need to postpone or which may need to be rolled over into another project potentially. All right. So one note here is that for monitoring and evaluation, that is something that as a project manager, you should be doing throughout the life cycle of the project. So once milestones are set, you can't wait until one phase. You need to be ensuring that from phase to phase, that you are really looking at meeting your milestones, how it can be improved, your approach to project management, that is, and whether the deliverables that were set out at the beginning of the project are being met at a quality standard in an effort to really implement this project successfully. So, as I mentioned, I wanted just to provide on this slide some of the key terms that I have found to be very useful in managing my own projects. And I manage projects for my own organization, and I've also been hired to manage projects for other persons within the creative sector and without the creative sector. So we would have mentioned a project charter in one of the early stages of the life cycle. So this tends to be a formal, typically short document that describes your project in its entirety. So you might have, you would be familiar with proposals, for example, dossiers, a project brief. The charter really is a more comprehensive document, and you'll notice that it's hyperlinked. You'll be able to click on that and see examples and get more information about what a charter really is. Industry standard, this is what the professionals use, and it really assists you in looking at all the various elements of your project and making sure that you're not leaving anything out. Because trust me, anything that doesn't come up in your planning phases, you tend to have that rolling over negatively into how well you're going to be able to implement your project in the later stages. So a charter is really important. We mentioned the work breakdown structure, commonly known as a WBS. So this is a hierarchical tree structure that outlines your project and breaks it down into smaller, more manageable portions. So I know that many people, they have this big vision. You have the idea for what you want to achieve by doing this project. And breaking it down is where, some persons may have a challenge. This is where the tools will come in. So some people are more visual, where you might want to use, sticky notes or a whiteboard. Some people prefer to use Excel documents or Google Sheets. And other people, to-do lists are your, method of choice. You really need to understand what is going to work for you, and again, we'll get into that. But for the work breakdown structure, you want to ensure that that is breaking down the large project into the various tasks that constitute that project, and then that is going to also help you do your timelines and look at what task is going to affect the other, and that just helps with management overall. Risk management, so again, I'm emphasizing this a lot, but I have seen that where we don't plan for risk, and I mean, it's not that you are all of a sudden turning into a pessimist, but it has to be that you understand that things are not going to go as planned. They never do. All right, so you plan for the 80% and then 20% can throw you off, especially in a time that is such a dynamic time based on the impact of COVID. So you really have to be thinking about what you and your team are able to control, what are some of the risks, even within the internal team. Did somebody just have a baby? Does somebody have an elderly parent that they're taking care of? Is somebody working on 5 other projects? All of these things need to be taken into consideration as to what might be risks to achieving your deliverables on time and at the quality that you wanted within the team. And then from an external perspective, if your project is being funded by a donor, how soon are you going to get the funding? Is it that you're going to have to put up money in advance of being able to implement the project and then get reimbursed for that after? All of these things are risks to your projects. And again, when you click on the title, risk management, that will take you to a page which will show you, multiple risks that can be considered in thinking about how you're going to deliver your project. All right, many people would be used to or familiar with SWOT analyses. The threats in a SWOT analysis are basically your risks. So when you're looking at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and then your threats, those threats are things that can really derail your project. And you have to be honest with yourself, with your team, about what those are and what measures will be taken into consideration to mitigate those risks. And then a term that we've used a few times so far in the session, key performance indicators. So KPIs are critical indicators of progress toward an intended result. Maybe you might be familiar with SMART, where you're looking at specific, measurable goals, where you want to make sure that you are very specific about how you're going to be determining your level of success and your level of productivity. So that is what key performance indicators, KPIs, refer to. And again, I encourage you to click on these links to do your additional reading. All right. Okay, so we've gone through these, and now we have our activity 1, which you're going to get 5 minutes to do. So I want you to think about your past projects that could have been more successfully implemented, or project fails, an element that could have been better managed, right? Based on what we would have shared so far. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I'm thinking about this, and I hope, the illustrations, the definitions would have put some things into context that you probably do just by nature. I mean, a lot of creatives, people think that we're unorganized. Many of us are. And this may be something you're probably just an organized person and you're able to track your projects by using pen and paper, Google Sheets maybe, and you don't realize that you're actually going through all these phases and considering all these elements. But my job here today is really to show you what these elements are, so that when things don't work according to plan, you know what you can look for in trying to tweak your approach to managing your specific project. So just take 5 minutes to give some feedback on that, please.
Elize, are persons meant to be writing in the chat?
Yes.
Or not yet?
Yes.
Because I'm not.
Yes, please go ahead. I'm not seeing any responses either.
Right. Maybe you could repeat the instructions.
Okay, guys, if you have an idea of basically what I'm asking is, based on your past projects, think about, based on what we've covered, project elements and the project phases, what could have been more successfully managed in projects that may not have been as successful as you would have hoped them to be. All right, so was it that you could have thought about the scope, because the scope was extended, you started off with one idea and that idea turned into 5 ideas, and you didn't have enough of a budget to meet all those 5 ideas. Did that cause the project to fail or to be less successful? Was it a challenge with your team? Was it a challenge with an external stakeholder? Just give me some feedback based on breaking projects down according to elements and phases. What you think have been challenges in the past that you could have better managed to make your project more successful.
Okay, so I'm seeing.
Yeah. So DeAndre is saying
one response there.
And project close. Yeah.
Yes, we're looking out for the other responses. Great, great.
Planning.
Catherine, see that one as well.
Risk and communication plan. COVID caused some
Okay.
difficulties with the timeline for delivery, and we didn't communicate it to the clients effectively. Scope and planning, budget, scope and budget communication plan. Yep. And all of us, these are not easy things to manage, especially as your projects become more complicated. And I think one of the things we have to realize, again, when we're doing projects, we're dealing with people. And the way that you think or the way your organization thinks, you may feel, okay, we thought this out, the plan is perfect, we're ready to execute, and that doesn't land with your stakeholders, maybe with your beneficiaries, maybe with your funder, maybe with the general public. So you really have to be working through, different perspectives, making sure that communication is regular and well maintained. And of course, from a budgetary perspective, we can have a lot of pitfalls in not properly managing our budgets. All right. So somebody said, yes, scope and budget treated them a bit too casual. Unaware of all these components going into the planning aspect, breakdown schedule, work breakdown schedule, risk management, personality conflicts, lack of funds, lack of ambition. All right, the concept phase. So the Gantt chart really, Natasha is asking, what is a Gantt chart? A Gantt chart assists you in managing the timelines of your project and looks at the responsibilities that overlap in getting the project to work effectively. All right. So I hope that answered your question, Natasha. I could always send you an example of that, but you find Gantt charts online, templates. I personally find Gantt charts a little unwieldy. I prefer to use Excel sheets, Google Sheets, but I'll get into why when we look at the case study. So Alicia says she went into detail. Thanks, Alicia. Alicia says, creating an e-commerce website to sell original paintings and art prints. The website has not been completed. I think phase 2 could have been managed better. Budget. Oh, child. I can relate. More time should have been spent to really get down into this and all the costs associated with creating a website. Also, some things are needed that were not considered initially. Example, legal requirements of such a website, terms and conditions, refund, privacy policy, cookie policy pages. Absolutely. So let me dig into this because this was a really good response from Alicia. Thanks, Alicia. So this is where experience really tells, and it's important from a team creation and team management perspective that you really are working through a lot of these things in the early phases of managing your projects. Legal things are things that most of us, we are not lawyers. We have an idea as creators and we want to see that idea come to fruition in the shortest time possible. But there are a lot of things that have to be considered, particularly because we're working in digital spaces now and across countries. So copyright, intellectual property laws, royalties, permissions, agreements, and you definitely want to make sure that you have somebody, if not on your team, but somebody that you can go to bounce things off of when it comes to contracts, agreements. So that's legal stuff. When it comes to finances, again, if you're able to do finances yourself, fantastic. As creatives, we need to be aware of what is required when it comes to budgets, cash flow, financial reporting, taxes. But I don't think that these things you necessarily have to do yourself. Obviously, it depends on how much money you have, how many resources, but definitely you want to look at options, whether it be, like Kingston Creative, maybe they have people in their network that you can reach out to. They can put you in touch with, that work with creators at discounted fees, etc. I know that I am part of an NGO group. We're looking to launch a hub soon that is going to provide shared services. And once I have that information, I can send it to you, Jackie, and maybe that can go out about how we as creatives and members of different sectors can support each other, particularly when it comes to accounting, financial management, project management as well, and other things that IT, things that really creative shouldn't be doing ourselves. You don't ask a doctor to do their own accounts, all right? So I think it's really important for us to be aware of obviously what is required in project management and managing our projects successfully, but understanding as well that some of your resources that need to be mobilized may be some of these, to fulfill some of these specific rules, all right? Olivia also had a really nice response. She said work breakdown schedule, definitely, and risk management. Also a lack of clear scope as this kept changing to accommodate a lack of budget and team resources. I can definitely relate, and I'll get into that with the case study. Those of us in a sort of managing role, we are all juggling multiple tasks. I wasn't a project manager on this one, but observed these issues in hindsight. Well, good on you that you were able to evaluate how things went. And I do hope that you were able to communicate those observations to the team so that those could be learnings for future projects. All right, budgeting was definitely lacking, as well as tracking, scope, and budget. So a lot of us are talking about managing human resources here from Leslie and budget, scope, and communication. And I think all of those are obviously. I'm extremely excited. Okay, Jackie, was that you? I just heard a voice. Okay. But all of these are critical elements. And definitely being, strong enough and brave enough to say, all right, guys, this is the idea that we have. We have to consider these things if the project is to succeed. It really makes more sense doing that at the start of something when you have the time versus having to make those decisions when something is about to go up on stage, or when a funder is asking you, calling you into an emergency meeting. I don't deal well with procrastination at all because I just think it brings undue stress. And unfortunately, some of us get off on that, you like that performance anxiety. So we really need to ensure that the way that we're looking at projects going forward really is helping us to do our best in effectively, seeing our ideas and our dreams come to life. All right, so there was a raised hand. Jackie, I saw. I think that was Sarah. Sarah, can you put your question in the chat, please? Because we also want to document the feedback from persons. All right, so moving forward, I know that was more than 5 minutes, but you all had fantastic answers, so I didn't want to miss too many of them. All right? And again, if anything comes to mind, definitely feel free to drop that in the chat. Okay? All right, so and let's see, what time is it? 3 or 4. All right, so we're making good time. So getting into some of what I get very excited about, because managing projects, it's really not an easy thing. It may be something that you're naturally suited for because you have a very pragmatic mind or you're very organized, and those are things that are just built into your character. But again, once a project starts getting more complicated, even for the most organized type A anal person, things can get very overwhelming very quickly. So what I have found in the last 20 years, and especially as technology has developed, is that there's so many things out there that can help you really keep track of what's going on in your projects. And we call these tools, as well as how you look at a project, and we call those methodologies. So your approaches to managing a project, and then what you use to manage that project. So we'll look at the methodologies first. I thought it made sense to do it in that order. So your approach to looking at projects, of which there are many, and then once you've decided on that approach, what tools align with those approaches that can be useful to you and your team in managing your projects. All right, so Project management methodologies are essentially different ways of approaching a project. We said that. All right. Each one has its unique process and workflow. Now, I don't want you all to get hung up on the terminology. I just think, we are doing project management, so I thought it was useful to include these so that you have it as reference. There are actually many more than these. I found, more than 16 different types of project management, and it's also methodology, sorry, and it's also useful to note that they are hybrid, so that you may choose one part of an approach and another part of that approach and pull those together to manage your project for your team based on, again, those quirks, those specific characteristics, the specific nature of what you're trying to do with your project, all right? So we have a critical path method, and Gray, I believe, or was it Natalie Gray? You were asking about a Gantt chart. This little illustration, it looks kind of what a Gantt chart would look like, but again, I encourage you to click on that link and go into looking up, doing some additional reading on a Gantt chart if you're interested in that. A Scrum approach, Lean approach, the Prism, Waterfall, you have Kanban, and you have Agile. And again, I am very visual, so I like, including these with the little illustrations so that you get a sense of the back, what these mean. So for the CPM, which is the critical path method, you're looking at the various responsibilities and tasks that are required for your team members, so the human resources, to get done over the shortest possible time. Now, this one may or may not be applicable to your projects. It really depends, again, on what you choose to use, and we'll look at how you determine what may be the best approach for your project management, for your team. But for the CPM, you really have to be very clear about deadlines. So when does a particular task have to start? When does it have to end? And if it runs over, how does that affect another task? All right, so you have the bird's eye view, but then you need to start breaking that down into the responsibilities and tasks of everybody on the team. All right, the Scrum approach or methodology, this emphasizes productivity, focus, and collaboration so that teams can build high quality deliverables quickly. So again, the CPM and the Scrum really look at projects that have to happen over a very short time frame. The Lean approach looks at how you can minimize waste. And some of these I picked, I won't say unobjectively, because a lot of my work has to do with environmentalism, zero waste, and conservationism. So these are some of the things that my team has really included in the way that we work when we look at reducing waste, upcycling, recycling. And that doesn't only have to do with products, it also has to do with time. How are we reducing wasted time and other wasted resources? So once you start building in these practices, they will get easier. But again, we want to make sure that we're choosing the approach and the tool that is best suited for ourselves as individuals, as well as for how our team functions. All right, again, something to do with the environment. We have the Prism approach, where projects integrate sustainable methods. So we'll get into this when we look at the case study, but most of us are familiar with many projects, events, and initiatives wanting to go green. So how can we reuse items, upcycle items, which is basically using an item and adding value to it? How do we reduce waste? And what are the ways, what are the KPIs, those key performance indicators that we are identifying to track how well we're doing with going green? All right, the waterfall approach, which is one of the more traditional approaches, just looks at you going from task to task over a more extended period of time than would be used for the CPM and the Scrum approaches. All right, the Kanban, many of you may have used this and didn't know that was the name for it. But if you're using a whiteboard, or you're using a board with sticky notes, even if you're doing that digitally, this is the Kanban approach, where visually you're able to see where tasks are fitting, who is responsible for what, the status of different tasks and responsibilities, and shifting those around based on what has actually been completed, what is pending, and what may have come up based on how the project is being implemented. And then the agile approach adapts to change. And during COVID, we've heard the words agility, pivoting, transformation. So a lot of us, again, are probably doing this as we speak and didn't know that it actually had, a term when it came to project management methodologies. So the agile approach really requires that you're adapting to change, you're capitalizing on trends. So you may have started a project, let's say this year, and then something happened, again, COVID. What do you need to do to pivot, to ensure that your messaging, what your deliverables are, your goals are not tone deaf, are actually meeting the needs of your stakeholders? So you may have started off with one idea, and then, mid-project, this needs to be changed in order to actually make sense based on the changed circumstance. All right. So again, these are just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 examples of methodologies. There are a lot more, and you can learn about those additional methodologies at write.com. Again, I just thought it would be easy to quote one site, but there are many sites out there if you Google project management. But again, I don't want you all to get overwhelmed about what is out there. You have to determine what is going to work for you. And this is how you can try to do that. So which is best for you? Choosing the right methodology is important because it defines how we work. So again, even if you're doing something based on tradition, based on your own personality, what has worked for you in the past, it's really useful from a communication standpoint to be able to identify what you're doing and why, so that the members of your team understand, your stakeholders understand, and it also makes you look a lot more professional, all right? So in identifying what methodology may be the best fit for you, you want to consider your project factors by their simplicity or complexity. So a simple project may require one approach, and a more complex project may require another approach, or it may be requiring that you combine several approaches. Determine the rigidity or flexibility of your work environment. So because most of us are working virtually now, and we're not, there in person, you may not be able to be using a whiteboard or sticky notes because you're not meeting in a physical space. So what can replace that if that is the approach that your team used to use in the past? Consider what delivers the most value. Again, we're looking at how much time, what is the budget that you have, what are the resources do you have, or can you mobilize to get the project done, and that's definitely going to affect your approach to managing the project. Leveraging your organizational goals. So it's important to understand, particularly if a project is being implemented by your own team, so you don't really have a lot of external factors at play, that you have to be very clear on how that project aligns with the greater vision and mission of your organization. Even if you're an individual artist, creative, based on the work that you do, the genre of music that you sing or you produce, in doing an album, is it that it's an evolution of that, creative journey, or is it something that your audience members, your listeners are custom getting from you? And how do you leverage your brand that you've already created to meeting the objectives of your project? I think a lot of times we forget that. We don't want to look at projects in isolation, especially if it's being built or put on by an organization and it's not that you are actually being contracted to doing that for somebody else. And even if that is the case, are you comfortable lending the strengths, whether it be your network, whether it be your space, your physical space, when we're able to get back to that, whether it be equipment, to do virtual sessions, for example, to your client in order to get the project done, all right? And again, you always want to be making sure that whatever you are involved in is not totally alien to your team's values. So for my organization, because sustainability, zero waste is critical to the work that we do, there are funders that we have had to say no to because of what they stand for and what their brand stand for, the products that they produce, because it just doesn't align with our values. So a lot of the work has to be done even in between projects, so that when you do get a project, when a project starts, some of this is already built in. You have a very clear vision, you've already understood or taken the time to understand how your team operates, what is going to work best for you, what your limitations are, what your strengths are, so that when you say yes to a project or when you conceptualize a project, it's much easier for you to take all of those things into consideration. All right. And again, can't emphasize this enough. Projects, and in this case, methodologies, are carried out by people. So use the ways your people think, relate, and work to build out a methodology that's a natural fit. Some things may feel uncomfortable, but you also don't want to be so far removed from the very nature of yourself as an individual or of your team or of your organization that the tool becomes more of a challenge than a benefit to you using it. Right? So sometimes we see software that looks all nice and fancy, and it really is not going to work for us because there's no buy-in. All right? Similarly with approaches. So we have to make sure that whatever approach we're using, we're taking into consideration the age ranges of members of our team. Are there, not to the ages, but are there people who are just not about technology? So some technological tool, we are going to have to provide training, or we are going to have to provide support for those members of our team that it's not natural for them to uptake those particular tools or approaches. All right. Are we working virtually versus in a physical space? All of those things have to be considered. All right. Choosing methodology depends on how well it meets your organizational goals and values, the constraints the project team has to deal with, the needs of stakeholders. So there may be some things that you have to compromise on. We spoke about values, but there may be some things that because you're being contracted to deliver a project for an organization, you as an individual or as a team, that you have to say, all right, this is not in direct conflict with how we would do things, but it's not a natural fit. But we can see, again, with support, with training, because of the gains or the benefits to be had, that this is something that we can say yes. And you also want to look at the risks involved, as well as the project size, cost, and complexity. So all of these things have to be considered when you're looking at which is the best fit for you in approaching the project. All right. Free project management apps. So again, because funding, I know definitely in our case, funding continues to be an issue. Looking for free apps, which there are many and good ones, has been something that has been useful for our team. And I place some of them here. Some of them are newer, some of them are more familiar than others. When you get the presentation, once you click on the various logos, it will take you to the landing page for that particular app. So if you're not familiar with it, or if you are familiar but want more information, you can read up more about it and see if one of these or several of these might be useful for your group. So Asana works really well for teams. This is my preference. That's what I use. And then we have, let me just go into the chat as well. And then somebody says they use Trello. It's good, Tanya. Thanks, Tanya. ClickUp, which is a new app, which I'm just, kind of navigating through. Slack, many of us know about Slack. Slack tends to be a lot more for communication. So where some people, really depend on emails, a lot of teams have been using Slack for years and, it works for them. For me, I tend to find that Slack gets a bit, overwhelming with all the messages very quickly. So again, it really depends on how you work, what your preference is, what works for your team, to decide on what tools may be best. FreeCamp is actually the free version of Basecamp, where this really puts things in visual perspective via the app. and it customizes project dashboards. So you're able to put in, to-do lists and different things on your dashboards to really keep track of your projects. Like Tanya says, Trello, this is a visually managing project. So again, go onto the different sites, see what works better with the phone that you have, if you use your phone more, or desktop if you use that more. Because a lot of us are on the go, well, less now with COVID, but the phone may be what you prefer to use, these types of software on. You definitely want to see whether the app on the phone also works for you based on how you can navigate through. Right, like we've been referencing throughout the presentation, is chock full of resources, and it also provides spreadsheet-like features. Zapier is a new one, and this actually integrates and automates a lot of your apps. So for me, I've been looking at Zapier to integrate my Wave account. And Wave, if nobody is familiar with that, or some of you are, some of you aren't, it's a really fantastic tool for managing your finances as a freelancer, as a small business owner. You're able to do invoices and estimates and things like that automatically from the site. And visually it's very easy to navigate. So that's wave.com, wave.com. And then Google, which honestly, for my team, this has been what has really saved us in terms of project documentation, because we work with so many volunteers, and we have people that come in and out of the organization based on the projects that we're doing. So once one person is no longer active, because things have been put into the Google Drive, whether it be a sheet or a document, a form, where we got responses via survey, all of these things I can go back, for years and check on it, get information, look up contact lists, service provider lists. So this really, I use Google Drive almost on a daily basis. So it's important to know that an app doesn't have to be fancy for it to be useful to you. I am not a techie at all, but I do believe that things can be automated and help you, do save on time, save on effort, but you have to make sure that it's going to work for you. All right. So again, looking at how some of these options should be considered, whether it be that or something else that you find, you want to ask yourself, will your team actually use it? And that sounds like a very basic question, but trust me, there were one or two apps that my team and I decided, okay, let's start trying to use this, and people just didn't take the time to, get used to it, and we really fell back on our Google Sheets or Google Docs. But as the project manager, I've found that Asana has really helped me manage the wider team. So that's also something that you can consider, that as a project manager or the executive of your organization or the lead in your organization, you may be using the tool that can then help you to communicate more effectively with your team. If you run into a situation where not everybody is willing to jump on board. All right, you also want to determine whether multiple departments can use the software. Again, looking at the complexity of the project. Is it a simple project where you don't need, a lot of brouhaha, or is it something more complex where these tools are really going to be a saving grace in making sure that you're not getting overwhelmed and things are not falling through the gaps? Does it support transparency and clear communication? And again, because reporting has become so critical for any project, especially when you have donors on board, sponsors, any kind of funding agency, they want to see how money has been spent, how resources have been utilized, and that needs to be communicated clearly. So a lot of these apps, you're able to pull information from the back end to influence and to integrate into your reports, which is really, really helpful in closing out your project successfully. Is the app flexible? Can you generate custom reports? Does it easily and securely allow for external communication or users? So some of the apps will allow you to create subgroups that will only be accessed by, your executive, and then maybe you have another group that is accessed by volunteers. So 2 different levels of security there, of authorization. Same thing with things like Google. You may not want to share an entire folder with somebody. You may just share a document within the folder with that person. So that's another thing when we're talking about legality. I know that we would have touched on that in the first hour. When you're looking at information, it's really important to look at how secure information is being stored. So where is it being stored? Who has access to that information being stored? Because this as well is something that you need to be reporting on. You definitely don't want leaking of confidential information, either your information, your client's information, your organization's information. So that's also a consideration to be had when thinking about software and project documentation in general. And does it integrate with other tools that you use? So again, just like we were talking about in looking at the values of your organization, and whether, choosing a project aligns to that, based on what you already have in place. Does an app align to that? Is it easily integratable with what you already use, or is it going to require a process to bring everybody and bring the organization's capacity on board with this new software that you're introducing? So some questions that you need to ask yourself to determine what may be best for your use. All right. You also want to consider how fast your team is growing, how dependent you are on each other to get things done, and whether your current processes are as efficient as they could be. And I think really that last, statement is the bottom line of all of this. If what you're doing is working, fantastic. Like they say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Definitely you want to look for areas of improvement. And that is where you need to be asking yourself on a constant basis, evaluating how you manage your projects, how you meet your goals. Is this actually working for me, for my team, for my clients? And if you're running into some of the same challenges, running out of time, being tired because you're doing everything manually, nothing is automated, not being sure of where anybody is, with meeting their particular responsibilities, getting their tasks done, it probably is time for you to look into a software that can assist you, an app that can assist you. All right, so this leads us to our next activity. So we'll take some time here for you to put into the chat, and Tanya started us off, where I'd love to hear from you if you've used any of these apps in the past, or any other software to help manage your projects, and which have you found to be most useful, and if you could say why as well. All right, so let's take about 5 minutes to give us those responses. All right, so just to repeat, please put in the chat feedback on if you've used any of these apps, if you've used other apps to manage your projects, how useful they have been, and why have they been useful. So Catherine has said she uses Drive every day, easy to share documents with team and collaborate. Sheena says Trello and Google Drive, free and easy to use. Janine, Google Drive. So Google seems to be 1 out of 4. Tanya said Trello. All right, so any other responses? Google Drive and Sheets and Docs, easy to share and update in real time with team. That's from Olivia. Devon, Drive. We have only used Google Drive. Let me go back up for collaboration feature. The other apps seem intimidating. And again, who was that? This was Taisha. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Taisha. But I completely hear you with tech being intimidating. As I said, there are links for each one when you click on the icon, the little logo. So I really, even with these, I think there are about 8 there. The ones that you don't know, just go to the website, take a look. All of these are free. If you feel so moved, you can sign up. And if you don't feel like using it, at least you would have explored something new. But it's great to be able to do this kind of work when you have the time. And I know a lot of us, for better or for worse, have some time on our hands now. It might be useful for your own professional development to look into new technology and see if it could work for you. If it can't, no harm in that, but there definitely has to be a tool that you select that's going to make your work a bit easier. So I'm glad that you use Google Drive. It definitely is useful for collaboration. Tanya says Trello allows each to be tagged in each note, images and documents can be shared, and also email notifications, for new notes added by each member. Catherine also says, my organization tried Slack, but I found it confusing. It was overwhelming for me too. I didn't last too long on Slack. All right, Chris says Google Drive to share source files. Eva says Trello, it's good for post, projects, and share. Google Drive, audio and documents. All right, so Google Drive seems to be the clear winner. So again, the only thing I would say with Google Drive is make sure from a security point of view, you're being very careful about who is shared on what. So you want to go through, and again, most of these things have tutorials. Look at a video. You want to go through on how you can have just the view function versus the edit function. If somebody has left the team, how to remove them from having access to a particular folder. Because especially when it comes to your legal stuff, contracts, agreements, your budgets, and reports that are supposed to just be for internal use, you don't want that getting out there. You don't want people's personal information. Like if you have a contact listing, you don't want that getting out there. So with Google Drive, one of the main things I would say, because it is so good at allowing people to share and collaborate, you want to make sure that you're looking at who has authorization to view what. All right. So Olivia says she will definitely check out the others, especially for replacement for Google Sheets. Yes. As it can easily get massively out of hand when trying to keep track of various aspects of the project in question. Agreed. All right. So Catherine also says she tries one called Mural the other day and allows teams to add sticky notes and share visual ideas. So that's great. So I will also check that out because I haven't seen anything on Mural yet. But I think especially since, the world has gone into virtual mode, you'll see a lot more apps being developed. Not all of them will be good, and you don't want to waste your time reading through. So what I tend to do periodically is do a search to see what are the top 7 apps, for 2020 or for 2019. And you will have a range of sites that would have done a review for you so that you don't have to wade through, all the different ones. So the top 7, it would probably be a good idea to check those out versus just doing a random search for project management apps. It will save you some time. All right? And Leslie says Google Drive and Asana, which is easy to navigate. Great. So let's see how we are doing on time. It is now 3:34. I think now would be a good time to take a break.
Yes.
Because it's been a lot of information.
Yes.
So let us sink in. Let's go for 15 minutes instead of 10. So let's be back at 3. What would that be? 50? Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah. In Jamaica, it would be 2:50.
Okay. Right. So 15 minutes from now, wherever you are, let's be back then. Go drink some water. Roy raised a hand. Roy, you want to put your comments into the chat, please? And you can message me privately if you'd like as well. All right. So we'll come back in 15 minutes. Let what we've gone through soak in. Definitely, if you have any questions that you've jotted down, feel free to use this time to put it in the chat, and we'll respond to those when we come back. Go drink some water, go use the bathroom, and then when we come back, we'll be going into the case study once I've fielded all the questions and looked at your feedback. And then from the case study, we will have the open discussion, talking about our various experiences with projects and any specific challenges that you'd like me to respond to. All right, so see you in 15. For those of you who are back on, I just put a link into the chat, titled New Fire Festival with a YouTube link there. That is going to feed into what we go to next. So we'll just wait for everybody to get back from the break. Give everybody about 30 more seconds, and then we will resume. All right, so welcome back, everybody. Let me know my audio is okay and everything. If you're not hearing, please let us know. All right, so heading into almost hour 3, but the additional time is going to give us the opportunity to look at, different examples of projects and challenges or successes that you are having with your own projects. So creative project considerations. So we'll be using a case study, which as I mentioned, will be my own festival, to discuss considerations in managing creative projects, particularly in the Caribbean context. I'll ask you to share your own challenges in managing projects, and we'll draw on this information as well as what we've gone through so far in today's session to identify relevant solutions and opportunities to managing creative projects more effectively. So if you go to that link in the chat, you can take a look at the festival video, but I'm also going to try to play it here. Fingers crossed that this works. Let's see. All right, so hopefully you're clicking on it, but I'm also pulling it up on my screen. All right, so that was a little taste of the Fire Festival. So I have been the festival director for the last, well, since inception of the festival. And we call ourselves a transformational festival. And what that means is that we are trying to really affect the behavior of persons who come to the festival or who read our material, who see our content positively, particularly when it comes to sustainable development, zero waste, and how we as a region, because though we're based in Trinidad and Tobago, we really see ourselves as a catalyst for change in the Caribbean, how we're doing this to move the region forward. All right, so it's grounded in culture, but we also integrate tourism, education, and we'll go through some of our focus areas. But to be honest, from a project management point of view, this has been a mammoth to take on. It has been one of the most challenging experiences of my life, but it definitely has been one of the most rewarding experiences. All right, so I'm also the director of the nonprofit organization that hosts the festival, and we were registered in 2011. And we have done 4 editions of the festival over the last 3 years. And again, once you get the slideshow, the PowerPoint presentation, you'll be able to click and see our festival guide from 2019. All right, so in conceptualizing what New Fire Festival was aimed to do, we really had to look at what are the challenges we're trying to solve, because nobody hired us to do this festival. This is something that was born out of the mind of our creative director and festival founder, who is also my partner. And we looked at what was the core problem that we were trying to solve, and what were the causes of that problem, what were the effects, and that definitely affected how we compose the festival, what the elements would be, how we approach managing things, how we built our team. So it really started from here. So we found that we have unsustainable and unregenerative systems, and in fact a whole paradigm when it comes to development, definitely in Trinidad and Tobago, and I could see throughout the wider Caribbean region. We've had persons working on the team from Jamaica, from St. Lucia, we've had interest in taking the festival to other spaces like Barbados and Guyana. And we've also developed really strong partnerships with persons from the UK and other spaces in the world that have similar festivals or who are interested in what we're doing. All right, so again, doing this kind of exercise with, okay, I have an idea, but what does that look like? You know, what are the factors that impact that idea, what we're trying to solve, what the solution should or could be, is really important at the start of your project before you get anywhere else. All right, so our focus areas are education, environmentalism, entrepreneurship, entertainment, engagement, and empowerment. And this again came through our initial ideas, but also in doing the festival over multiple years. And every year I look at the festival as a singular project, and over the years, the festival as an initiative is a program. So again, making that distinction. So we go through the project life cycle for every year of the project, but then year after year, we're able to build on New Fire Festival as a brand, as an initiative, and take our learnings from one year to the next. So really distilling what we're trying to do, our focus areas, into these 5, 6 pillars came over time. We had an idea of this is what we wanted to do at the beginning to meet the challenges that you would have seen in the previous slide. But, you know, in writing proposals and having to, you know, really break our communication down into the very bare bones, these are the pillars or focus areas that we would have come up with. So as mentioned, we're really bringing together culture, sustainability, and tourism. All right, and we've been able to do this very successfully. We've created quite an attractive brand. Our main demographic are 18 to 35-year-olds, and it definitely has been something that has really changed the landscape when it comes to green events, zero waste events, how people view green living in Trinidad and Tobago at least, and to some extent the Caribbean. You all can tell me in the chat if you've ever heard about us. We are not Fire Festival. We are not that festival that happened in Bahamas. We were there before, and that's us. We're not associated. But if you've heard about our festival, it would be useful to know where word has gotten to. All right. And then looking at our KPIs, you know, and I'm not going to go into exactly because we had so many and have so many. But data for me is critical, and as the primary project manager for the festival, being festival director, it's really critical for me to be able to see how we're going from year to year by culling these numbers from our surveys, our questionnaires. We do polls before the festival, we survey festival attendees during the festival, and then we also have post surveys. Because we use social media so often and so widely, as well as digital media, because we have a mailing list, we use MailChimp, that kind of thing, we're also able to pull these metrics from the back end of our social media platforms. So we went from 700 people in 2016 to 2,500 in 2019. And whilst you have festivals around the world that have tens of thousands of people, this was based on the type of event that we are offering to the public. It is very, very different for Trinidad and Tobago. This is an achievement for us because this is a growth of over 200% in festival guests. I will also mention that the festival is a 3-day event where we have persons camping on site overnight. So we've definitely seen a rise in the number of campers through the years, which has been a big win for us because it means that you have a captive audience over multiple days versus people just coming for half an hour, half a day, which we have as well. But the number of people spending more time with us over the weekend, over the 3 days, has definitely increased to the point where our campsite was, almost packed to capacity in 2019. We also keep track of not only our festival guests, and when I say festival guests, that would be patrons, people who are coming just to camp, take in the music, eat good food, play with their kids at the festival, but we also look at our other stakeholder groups. So we look at our number of partners, the persons and groups that we've collaborated with, our number of volunteers, and you'll see that this definitely spiked in 2019. We had over 400 volunteers, which by itself was a lot to manage. Our performers, which have had a steady growth, a little dip in 2019, but we had more bands versus individual performers, so that affected the quantity of performance, but not really the program. And then our vendors and exhibitors, because a big part of what we see as sustainability is pushing buy local. So we create a space where small entrepreneurs, micro entrepreneurs are able to sell their locally made and locally sourced products, from jewelry to soaps, to different types of food, etc. I started off by saying that we're a transformational festival. So in terms of behavior change, this is also something that we have to make sure that we are evaluating, assessing, to be able to say, okay, well, this makes sense to continue on for persons to invest in, etc. So when we surveyed persons in 2019, they said they had given further thought to adopting more sustainable practices because of coming to the festival. We don't allow plastics on site because of our zero waste policy. We actually have a hydro station that launched their business at the first edition of our festival in 2016, and they have grown because people have seen them at the festival. They've been able to, meet new clients because of working with us. And we've saved over 28,900 plastic water bottles through use of that hydro station. And that alone is a big win for us. How did we get that number? The service provider actually has a counter on his water station that, based on water volume, is able to tell you, okay, this amount equals that number of plastic bottles that we've prevented from going to the landfill. So that is a big number over the 4 editions of the festival. And then year after year, we've tightened up our zero waste policies through marketing, promotional material that goes out before the festival, letting people know what zero waste means, what expectations we have of them as a festival goer, and that has seen a decrease year after year in our amount of waste, because going zero waste doesn't mean that you don't produce any waste. What it means is that once things are produced, it's either biodegradable, so we compost all the food waste coming out of the festival, it's recycled, or it's upcycled. So nothing is actually going to the landfill, and you have that closed loop system. And then you'll see other things that people have considered doing in terms of minimizing plastic, sorting their waste, and composting. And we have workshops at the festival that actually speak to all these various practices. All right, because we are looking at developmental organizations to partner with, and we have partnered with entities like the IDB and the UNEP, it's really important for us to know what is the global conversation. So the SDGs are something that we take into consideration when doing our management plans, so that we are aligning to these global objectives. And that is also filtered into our communications with our festival guests. And we have somebody, reflecting on that, making a comment on that. And just, a map here of our reach, again, looking at our social media analytics, metrics that we were able to pull from the back end. And this is something that, again, sponsors, people want to see. We definitely want to get more of a spread as the brand is developed, but this is where we are currently. And a hashtag that we've created, EcoSexy, which we think is, kind of cute. All right, so that was my spiel in terms of my projects. But I would really like to hear from you all what kind of projects you have done on your own or with a team, and what some of the challenges or some of the wins that you've had, and that is, or even questions about NIFA Festival, and that's going to spark our open discussion. So definitely put in the chat. I want to have an idea of projects that you've worked on, either successfully or not, in the past, or maybe something that you have currently, pending. I know that we had somebody talking about a website where art could be sold. So definitely we'd love to get more feedback like that. And what do you think about managing creative projects? What have been some of your biggest challenges? What have been some of your biggest achievements? And let's have that discussion to close out our session.
I'm noticing that we have some comments in the chat, Elize.
Okay,
I don't know if
so
we
let me
could take
go.
those as we
Yes.
go through.
Yes. All
Leslie
right.
Ann mentioned that she's volunteered at Stagehand in
Right.
2017,
Yes, 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 yes.
as well
Leslie
as
Ann was such
Olivia.
a fantastic asset for us. All right.
And Olivia here says, yes, been keeping up on IG since 2018, 2019.
Now, I must say, yeah, COVID has really affected us. I will share our IG info, Deandra, so I will share that. Maybe I don't want to disrupt anything, so give me a sec. But yeah, we've been really quiet, and I will just share our personal journey. Because the reason why I'm so passionate about all of this is that I've been on so many different aspects of managing projects. Some have been paid to do NIFA Festival. I have not been paid, right? This year, because we partnered with UNDP, we as the organizers were able to get stipends, but that hasn't happened in the past. The first year of the festival, we were actually able to do it based on personal finances that were invested into the festival, which we're still, paying off loans on. So it's really important for you to understand how much you're willing to invest yourself in your own vision, what that's going to require from a energy, from a financial, from a time perspective, and what you can really lay on the line. So this is some of what I want us to kind of dig into, because I didn't want to get into the formal parts of how you source funding, but I think it's really important, because that is such a huge challenge for many of us in the Caribbean, that we discuss that with our own projects and have some sharing around how people have worked around that in managing their projects. I know earlier when we were talking about what elements have been affected or what elements have caused the lack of success with projects, a lot of people spoke about budgets, right? Because you didn't get the amount of money that you were hoping to get, maybe from a funder, etc., that affected the scope of your project. And definitely for the festival, every year we have, a very clear idea of what we want to do in terms of our growth trajectory, our strategic plans, but it really boils down to, based on our initial experiences where we were, much younger and much more excited about bringing this type of event to the Caribbean. We really have, I guess, become more grounded in reality. And we have to balance that mobilization of resources with what is able to be done when it comes to actually putting on such a large scale project. So again, tell me, what kind of projects you all have worked on, right? So Diandra, I'll share the IG info shortly. Okay, Taisha said she was not seeing my screen. Taisha, let us know if you're seeing the screen now. All right, Deborah Paul said she was also a volunteer in 2019. She said, we have another question. Sorry. How does one project plan following the project cycle in a pandemic situation? All right, sorry, let me just exit out of this and make sure that I am screen sharing, because I don't think that was back on. Sorry guys, just 1 second. But keep on putting your comments in the chat. Right, so hopefully that is working now. Okay, great. Thanks, Deborah. Thanks. Yeah, as I said, I'm not the most techy person, so thanks for bearing with me. All right, so going back to Alberta's question, how does one project plan following the project cycle in a pandemic situation? So really, acts of God, for most of you who have had to read through a contract or natural disasters, anything like that would be considered a risk in a project. Did most of us foresee COVID? No. Did most of us foresee the impact of COVID on our projects? No. And to be honest, a lot of us are still trying to pivot, are still trying to transition into another way of operating and delivering on our projects based on the way that we are forced to work right now. So I'll just speak from, our personal perspective. We have been really quiet. Actually, our team has gone into hiatus over the last few months because we've had to just take care of personal, life. But we have definitely kept in communication with our partners, our funders, most importantly. They have been very understanding because being a large-scale live event, there's no way that we could have done an event over the last few months. We have definitely been brainstorming about how we can do something digital or virtual, as the case may be. But it's really important to understand that not everything is going to translate into different spaces or by using a different approach. So we want to make sure that whatever we're delivering to our audience, whatever we're delivering based on the commitments that we've made to our partners is in line with our objectives, is in line with the brand, and we're still trying to tweak that, right? So we have a few things on the back burner, but, from a COVID standpoint, the live events industry, as we all know, has been severely affected. So we could get into that as well. How has COVID affected your projects? Were there any projects that you were in the middle of that, have had to be put on pause, postponed, because of COVID? Have you been able to pivot, that word that all of us have had to use over the last few months with your own projects because of COVID? Has it made your projects better? Because some people are saying that, okay, the physical thing, it would have taken so much resources, and transferring things now to a virtual space has actually improved the quality of their delivery. On the other hand, for some people, it has gotten more expensive because we also have to consider, does everybody have an internet connection that's steady? Does everybody have an electronic device that can connect to the internet where they can consume this content, whether it be a training session like this? Kevin is saying, I've produced many animated short films. Lack of understanding of the art form has led to many problems regarding local clients. And I understand this, Kevin, because I work, with Camille Savon Abrahams. I know that there's been a lot of work in developing an audience for what people still think of as a very new art form. Regardless, Kevin continues, regardless, I've been able to receive some grants to help in the production of some of the films, which I'm extremely glad and grateful to have completed. I usually work with as small a team as possible to avoid complication. The way forward is looking towards the outside world, as the region has both an extremely limited market and appreciation for this art form. It is a sad truth that they would pay a foreigner 10 or more times what they would pay a local person to produce the same job. Similarly, it is practically useless to bid for government projects, as corruption and nepotism are to be expected. I am trying right now to create viral animations to increase awareness of my works globally, and there has been some success in this. Thank you for this very, very thoughtful and considered response, Kevin. And I know that before COVID, so we almost have to say pre-COVID and post-COVID, and I guess during COVID, there were some things that just weren't landing, especially in our region where, we tend to still be very traditional, and traditional is not a bad thing. But again, like we looked at the apps, there are ways that we can embrace technology to make our work stronger, reach wider audiences. And I don't think it was embraced. Some of these technological tools or platforms weren't embraced the way that they could have been. But COVID is forcing us to do that. E-commerce, which some of you all may have signed up for those sessions with Kingston Creative under this project. E-commerce is something, as soon as COVID hit, a lot of people turned to that as ways to make money. So you had people teaching dance classes online and having persons pay either online or through a bank account. So there were a lot of things that had to happen in a matter of months that really should have been, framework should have been put in place. Planning, training should have been happening over the last decade or so. But this is where we are, and let's look at COVID and the current situation as an opportunity, even amidst all the challenges. All right? We know that within the Caribbean, nepotism, corruption does play a part, and this is why transparency is so important. There are some things that you may not need to share, or you may choose when you share it, but for people to really buy into your brand, buy into your project, sharing information is something that we have to get a lot more comfortable with. And I think by nature, as Caribbean people, it's something that we struggle with. Collaboration is also something that we struggle with. So when it comes to team management, I hear you on working with smaller teams, and that definitely may work better for you in managing your project, Kevin. But there may be instances where you're working with a team abroad. I had a friend who used to work in the States for quite a big company, and they would send a lot of things to Indonesia for animation. And there was a lot of, back and forth across time zones that had to be happening to get those films produced. So we never know what opportunities are going to come knocking at our door. So while we have the time, which most of us, at this point do, and I applaud you for taking the time to invest in a professional development by doing this course, being involved in the session, we really want to equip ourselves to take advantage of those opportunities. All right. Janine says, COVID has made some projects much better with everything online. I have reached a wider audience, given me more time to execute some projects I'm planning. So Janine, let us know what sector you're in, because I'll be interested to see how that has been married with your approach during this COVID time. Olivia, the ongoing organizer for the Haruna, well, I'm sure I butchered that. My pronunciation is horrible. Film Festival. I think, did North 11 work with you? I think last year or year before? No, 2019 was our inaugural year as the first film festival in Vinci, right? But I believe that North 11 mentioned you, if I'm not mistaken. Let me know if I'm right or if I'm totally off base, Olivia. COVID is just weeks away from our second edition this year. One of our biggest wins, I'd say, was the community response and support locally and regionally. I don't think any of us imagined it would have turned into what it has when we initially sat down to see how we could make it happen with core teams of 4 people. A literal handful of volunteers, right? Okay, so you answered my question before I knew you had answered my question. But North 11 had really fantastic things to say about your festival. They mentioned there was one incident where rain was pouring down and everybody was there with their umbrellas looking at the film, and it was really a beautiful moment. And these are the things that really makes it worth it. I mean, some of the things that we do as festival organizers, as dancers, as animators, as creatives in general, are really crazy to the average person. And this is what Douglas says, that there are some people who live in a dream world, there are some people who face reality, and then there are those who turn one into the other. And really what doing a project is that you're taking that idea and you're giving birth to it. So I don't have any children, but I feel like every edition of the festival is a child, because you go through a whole year of incubation and then 3 days of delivery, and then you start all over again, right? So great. Alberta is connecting with Olivia. So definitely we want to see more of these connections happening when we have our networking session. That's fantastic. So Natasha said, the pandemic has opened up the landscape, as I am now involved in a storytelling project that is exclusively in the online space. The audience is now global. Fantastic, Natasha. If you want to drop links to things, definitely feel free. All right. Janine says, I am in music. You're a singer, songwriter, recording artist, and work with a music NGO in Jamaica. Fantastic. Right. So thanks, Olivia. Yes, you work with North 11. Yeah. They are fantastic, a really, really, really amazing team. So Leslie Ann says, this time during COVID can be taken as an opportunity to educate the public about work that is being done so that the visibility of a brand is maintained and increased. And as such, during and post-COVID, the brand can survive and thrive. Completely agree, Leslie Ann, and it's definitely something I wish we could have done more of for New Fire. But it really, I just personally stopped to take stock of what my life had been over the last 4 years, and really understand that resources had to kind of be built back up on a personal level, even while giving so much to the festival. So sometimes, you just have to give yourself a break, understand that there are commitments that you have and you want to honor those commitments. Look at the investment that you've made in developing a brand, but you also have to be checking in with yourself, checking in with your team members. That's where the empathy comes in, the effective communication, so that we know that, because it's not robots doing this work, right? So, I mean, unless they are, firsthand how grueling, doing the festival was. So that's something else that we need to be aware of from a mental perspective and emotional perspective. The project is not running itself. We as project managers, that it's us, it's human beings. And if we're not okay, the project is not, it's not going to have that extra spark of creativity and energy. All right. Janine says she also coaches singers, beginners guitar, and English online. Great to know. Imani says she's worked on songs, harmonies, lyrics, recording with producers in and outside of Jamaica virtually. I was gearing up for my album release party, but with COVID, I'm planning a virtual concert for the album release. Posting it live virtually, easier to invite people to the venue with just a click the link, so that's a plus. All right, so thanks for sharing the link to your music, Imani. I will definitely check it out. All right, and thanks for sharing these links, Olivia. I would love to connect with you further, because I think, as festival organizers throughout the region, there's definitely something to be said for creating, a festival network of non-carnival festivals. That's a bit of a controversial statement, but, looking at what else we can offer to the world from a tourism festival standpoint, I think is really important, with how we're going to get through COVID. And looking at what other options we have for people engaging with our culture and not just popular culture. All right, so Kevin says most of my work is digital, so at least that is a positive. Some persons are badly affected, and regions were unable to get commissions done, but it seems that overall persons stuck inside have given a sort of captive audience and will lead to more work later on. So that's a good point in terms of taking this time, just like Leslie Ann said, to stay visible and continue developing your audience. So that once things, from a physical perspective, when we can do events, we'll see how that goes. Again, you will not have lost members of the audience. Actually, you have an opportunity to gain audience members. Perhaps the work for which I'm most known locally is my animated film, Temple in the Sea, which premiered at the Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival in 2017, which Film Co has facilitated to have shown on TTT along with some of my other films. Yeah, Film Co did a fantastic job working with the film festival this year to partner with various stakeholders, TTT, the Premier one among them, to reach people in their homes online with local content. Right, and thanks for sharing your handle online. Right, so you're saying you can be found here, Bloop one, I think, where I produce animation layered over live action footage, giving life to inanimate objects in ways that perhaps must be seen to be really understood. Great. Yes, and lots of love for Olivia. Again, I only heard good things about your film festival, so congratulations. All right. Okay, great. So thanks for all the links, everyone. If anyone has any additional links to share, feel free. All right, let's take a look at the time. 4:25 right now. All right, so Roy, I know you had your hand up earlier. You're saying you're an author of a book on investing on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, and this is just part of a 3-part book that's available on Amazon. Roy, can you tell us, because I heard about this, but it's something that I haven't yet investigated. Is there a civil society stock exchange or part of the stock exchange in Jamaica? It's something I found really interesting when I heard about it. But basically, I think it's the availability of creative organizations and non-profit organizations to put stock up. I could be way off, so let me know if I'm wrong. On the Jamaica Stock Exchange to really facilitate investment by the private sector. And that's something that I think, different Caribbean territories can be looking at as ways of supporting the work that creatives do and the civil society does, because to be quite honest, sponsorship from corporate entities is going to be a lot more challenging to access over the next 1 to 2 years. All right. Aurora is sharing his book, How to Invest, the Beginner's Guide to the Jamaican Stock Market. All right, so great, thanks for this link. All right, and we have persons sharing each other already. Right, so the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange. So thanks for that, Roy. So I definitely have to do some investigation on that, because it's something that I definitely want to recommend that at least in Trinidad and Tobago we look more closely at, creating one here potentially, and how that could also affect the wider region. All right, so we have a lot more people on the chat, so definitely send us your input, share, let us know what projects you've worked on, what have been your successes, what you've done in the past, what you're currently working on, how COVID has affected you, and anything specific based on what we would have covered today, anything that I would have shared based on my festival, anything at all, let us know so that we can add this to the open discussion. Let me see, I'm just scrolling through. Let me see if I can. If I missed anything. I want to touch on something that Kevin spoke about in his response, his earlier response, about lack of understanding. And I would have mentioned audience development. And I think, a lot of us who have started doing things that are out of the ordinary and again non-mainstream, it's really important to understand that that is going to be one of your risks or threats that you can turn into an opportunity as a project manager or as a leader in your organization or as an individual creative when coming up with projects or ideas for initiatives. Factoring in how from a communication standpoint, a brand development standpoint, you can put things out there that is really going to build an audience for you. So you always want to make sure that your content is as good quality as possible. So this is where collaboration comes in. So who is going to be doing your graphics? Who is going to be doing your visuals? Whether it be video, whether it be animation. Can you look at doing things differently? So if you're a singer, maybe you would have shot a video, of yourself before, but maybe it could be animated, or maybe animated elements could be included. So I think we really have to open our minds to what is possible, particularly within this time where so many people are willing to work virtually, where they may not have been willing to do so in the past. And we have access to not only people within the region, but we also have members of the diaspora who are very proud, Caribbean people who are willing to work with other people from the Caribbean to get things done, who may have access to resources that we don't have in the region. So I think those are things that we also have to be thinking about. Alberta is asking, what do you see the Caribbean creative space looking like post-COVID? I think from a very general perspective that we are going to be forced and hopefully more willing to collaborate. Because I will tell you from the start of doing, our festival, we really try to throw the net out there and find organizations that were interested in what we were also trying to fulfill when it came to environmentalism, zero waste living, green living, sustainable development, and sustainability in general. And we got a lot of no's. A lot of people didn't understand what we were trying to do in 2016. Didn't want to work with us because we didn't have a brand at that point, not for the festival. We had started a concert series, New Fire concert series, 2 years before that. So people knew New Fire, but the festival was a very new thing. And collaboration, as I said, as Caribbean people, sometimes we tend to be a bit secretive about how we're able to do things, where we've been able to access funding. And over the years, and particularly during this COVID time, I have definitely seen a surge in people wanting to work together because we're being forced to now. So what people cannot leverage from a financial perspective, people are willing to barter. So, I may not be good at doing graphics, and you may be a graphic designer. I may be a videographer. So we're able to barter services. Obviously, you always want to be careful in looking at value exchange, making sure you understand what your services are worth realistically, given the current context, and what the other party's services are worth, and what you're willing to exchange, for those services. But definitely, I think post-COVID, even as we transition out of COVID, which who knows how long that's going to be, collaboration is going to be key to the survival of our creative and cultural industries. So I hope that answers your question, or do at least in part. Definitely a lot more things are going to be happening digitally. My fear is that if we don't have e-commerce systems and government is not supporting the development of the framework for people to be paid online, for people to accept payments online, opening up, loan facilities for micro enterprises and small businesses, all of those financial things, if that is not supported along all layers of society, so public sector, private sector, as well as civil entities, what my fear is that the work of creatives won't be able to be sustained if we're looking at virtual platforms. And what I mean by that is, if you are a craftsperson, so you're custom, making jewelry, painting, sculptures, whatever with your hands, and you're not able to sell those things now because pop-up markets, galleries, all of those things are not happening in the way that they did. If you're not able to accept payments online, then, and the e-commerce systems are not in place, then we're really limiting how much people can earn. And I mean, that runs across the sector. So there are lots of things people have been putting up online in terms of content, because as creators, we need to create. But if there's no money coming in based on that going out there, there will be some benefits. You're growing your audience, you are staying active. But from a financial point of view, we could be digging ourselves into a hole. So I think definitely post-COVID and transitioning out of COVID in this, recovery phase, we definitely need to look at different elements of society supporting the continued development of the creative and cultural industry. So collaboration, and then all these frameworks, all these policies that are going to really help us continue to earn money as creators. That's what I see out there. Right? Marcia Riley Brown, she said she worked as a museum administrator for the better part of 20 years. She's currently trying to reinvent herself as a freelance arts and events administrator, helping to plan, organize, and execute virtual and live events and programs. Marsha, tell us how that is going for you. Have you had success with that so far? Have you had, clients being added to your roster? Maybe some of your fellow participants here can become clients. So if you have, a website or any kind of, maybe a LinkedIn page, you can share that. And people feel free to share your LinkedIn page links, or your IG page links, handles, etc. Because definitely when we get into networking, I'm sure that's going to be useful to facilitate connectivity. So Kevin says, for my own mental health and based on the dishonesty and bad experiences, I've tried to avoid it. These problems have generally not been nearly as prevalent when dealing with online persons. So Olivia is asking for Alberta's link. Right? Alberta, absolutely collaborative, creative space, a true character. The thing is, we are all a small island developing states, small, so we really have to be looking at the Caribbean region as our audience when we're doing things. All right. Obviously, it's going to be different based on the nature of your project. There will be specifics that may have to be local, community level, etc. But from an audience perspective, building your brand, getting that visibility, we have to look at the Caribbean space as a community and also be factoring the diaspora, particularly because we're putting so much information and content online now. So most of my family live in Canada. They have for decades, and they're not really connected to what's going on the ground in Trinidad and Tobago. I've worked in different Caribbean territories, and there's so much that we can learn from each other. And I think now is a time where we need to be engaged in that, encouraging that, and really looking at, from a revenue earning perspective, what that means for us as creators in terms of, sustainable livelihoods. Right? Deandra says, I'm an event planner at DSM Events. I have mainly worked on events in Jamaica. I was one of the lead organizers for the first home and car experience in Jamaica. It was the first time that all competing car providers were in one space. It was challenging with a team of 5 persons, but overall the response was good. We are trying to decide when the next one will be since COVID. Right? Natasha's asked, can we access online payments and bank transfers? Some people can. What I have found in talking to a range of stakeholders is that, some people still don't have credit cards. I don't have a credit card. I have a debit card that works online, which is a VTM card that is issued by Republic Bank. But they've actually stopped issuing those cards, and mine expires next year. So I am looking into getting a credit card. But there are some things that are still very unwieldy. There are some people who are still very intimidated by dealing with banks. I mean, we have several stakeholders that only have accounts with credit unions, which is fine, but it also limits online payment mechanisms. So I think in the whole conversation of digital and virtual, there are a lot of basics that we're overshooting based on where people are with their own development and the access that they have to some of these things. So there are people who are on the techno train, for years before this with PayPal and all of these things. And there are some people who they've been artisans most of their lives and they don't even have a bank account or their business is not registered. So we have to look at people across the spectrum and really try to make a space for everybody as far as we can. All right. Thanks, Lezian, for putting in your LinkedIn link here. Natasha is saying, we as Caribbean people can be very versatile, totally agree. This COVID situation has caused us to use that innovative ability that is built into us and pivot. I was most heartened to see the Tobago Heritage Festival happening online. So was I. They did a really, really fantastic job. Right? Deandra says, since COVID, I've also added a few unique services to our offerings. I've added a new voice-over service for events and corporate needs to include jingles, directory assistance. That's fantastic, Deandra. I've also added an event letter and proposal writing service as well. COVID has definitely forced us to adapt and find creative ways to earn, and I completely agree with that. I think one of the things we all have to do is look into our toolkits and see what have we kind of taken for granted that we're able to do that could actually earn us money. It may be something that we never thought about. For me, as I said, I've been managing projects formally and informally for almost 2 decades, well, just over 2 decades actually. And it's just something that I did because I'm an organized person. I'm creative, so I understand, I understand the creative process, but I'm also very pragmatic. So on teams, I would always really want to break things down. Who's doing what? When are we getting it done by? That's just how my brain works. And over time, people started hiring me to do this, right? So there may be something like Deandra, you've probably had a lot of experience with writing proposals for your own projects and realized that some of your friends, some of your colleagues, needed this assistance or needed to just pay somebody to get it done. Maybe you have a really good brain for finances and you can, offer financial services for creatives or IT services for creatives. So I think we definitely, in this time where producing work within our specific creative set of skills might be a challenge because maybe, it's a luxury item where people are not necessarily spending or don't have the money to spend on those items. We need to look at, okay, maybe I'm a crafts person, and instead of selling, my craft, I can teach workshops online on how to make certain things that people can find around the house, using like paper mache or upcycling. All of these things, we really have to use that innovation, use that versatility we have as creative people, and really see how this can get us more work. Because at the end of the day, we all have to eat and we all have to bolster ourselves to survive. So this is where, again, community is really important because where you may not have certain skills, there may be a colleague or somebody that you've worked with or somebody that you've always seen, on Instagram or on LinkedIn. Click that button, make that connection because you never know what opportunities can come about because of those connections. So Marsha says, I'm about to sign a contract with my first client. Don't yet have any business links in social media, but can be found as myself, Marsha Riley Brown on Facebook and LinkedIn. Right? And she's put her handle in there, Brown Girl in the link. Thank you so much, Marsha. Right? And Lezian says, online classes are definitely a great way to continue to earn. And Lezian, I know that you've definitely done a lot of workshops. You did that workshop at Caritas last year. So great. Thanks for sharing that. It's really important for us to know that what we've learned, because another thing we as Caribbean people tend to be is quite modest. You really have to be very objective about what you've been able to achieve and what your skills are. And it's not a matter of boasting or tooting your own horn. It is really just looking at what you're able to do and what people will pay you to do and what is required for this space. Because all of this is about developing the creative and cultural industry space in the Caribbean. All right. So Kevin says, in Trinidad, accessing online payments has sadly proven to be a nightmare. I know people have horror stories, Kevin. For selling digital goods, people seem to largely prefer PayPal, but getting it to work locally is very difficult for someone in my circumstance. People seem to not even know about bank transfers and Western Union in these modern times. Again, financial literacy. I know I was on a call where we were talking about cultural literacy and creative literacy. And I'm sure this has happened to many of you. You go into a meeting with somebody who may not necessarily be a creative or be part of the sector, and they're looking at you like if you're speaking Greek. So when we're talking about communication and that communication plan and getting buy-in from different stakeholders, you have to understand who you're going to speak with, where they're coming from, and how you can express your ideas or your plans in a way that is going to land with them to really get buy-in, all right, whilst we work on developing an audience. Because I will tell you, in 2016, nobody really knew what a zero waste eco transformational festival was. And 4 years later, with the brand growing in the way that it has, people understand, okay, if I'm going to this event, I have to go with my reusable water bottle. This is what zero waste means. And we've seen that development. But it does require consistent messaging. It does require creating something that's attractive that people buy into. And it does require building a network and a community around what it is you're trying to do. And that takes work, you know. So there are definitely things that the government can help with from a tourism standpoint, from a messaging standpoint, you know, utilizing P2T, utilizing different platforms to get information out there about the work happening in the creative and cultural industries. I know the Ministry of Culture, for good or for ill, they have been able to do some really fantastic things. But the onus is on all of us to really talk about the work that we're doing, get people on board with it because that messaging is consistent, but also understand how we have to communicate to get that buy-in, all right? Kevin continues to say, attempting to access payments with a local friend's PayPal seems to have led to only the payments bouncing back. Using a foreign-based colleague as an intermediary is a workaround in the short term, but of course far from ideal. Some people accept digital gift cards on Amazon, etc., as another form of a workaround. However, the removal of some of the regulations that prevent us from easily creating PayPal accounts is truly the only way forward at large. Many persons I know would be glad to export their digital goods but cannot due to the lack of this option. Sadly, it seems talk of increasing Trinidad's digital exports has remained only that. And I have to agree that we haven't really seen a lot of movement when it comes to freeing this up for us in TNT, Kevin, to really facilitate e-commerce payments. All right. So Alberta is asking if a recording will be available. Yes. Jackie said that an email will be sent to you from Kingston Creative, letting you know how you can access the recording. Diva said that is asking, how do you start teaching online? Leslie, maybe you could, I don't know if you've done any online webinars or workshops, or maybe you all can exchange contact information. Well, Leslie already put her LinkedIn address in the chat, Diva. But also just give us a little bit of feedback, Leslie, on how one starts teaching online. Eva will just, while Leslie, if you're willing to, Leslie, I'm sorry. While she may take some time to put that in there, I will say from my own perspective, it really is just, you know, joining different groups, you know, professional groups. I would have seen the opportunity to become a trainer for Catapult for this initiative via a mailing list that I'm on, which is Export Caribbean, or Caribbean Export, sorry. And, you know, they shared it that Kingston Creative and the partners were looking for trainers, and I applied. So I think it's really important to get out of our comfort zones. You know, as creatives, we're in our heads a lot, you know, we're working on our things by ourselves, and now more so because we're in our own spaces and not working together. But it's very, very important as a professional for your own professional development, to increase your learning, your earning capacity, sorry, to stay connected, particularly with things that, are regional, or that, tend to provide opportunities. So Caribbean Export, look them up, join mailing lists. CARICOM also has a mailing list. They send something out, at least once a month. I'm sure Kingston Creative has a mailing list. So Jackie, at the end of the session, could probably tell everyone how you can join their mailing list. And, do a search. Even within this group, there will be people who have organizations that would tend to share opportunities or links to opportunities as creatives. There are also online training platforms, Hiva. So Zoom Basic, which is what we're using now. Then there's something called Thinkerific that I was looking into. A lot of there are platforms out there like Canva and others that provide templates, where you're just dropping your content in and you don't have to spend the time building something visually from scratch. So it really makes your stuff look a lot more professional. I mean, even my presentation, I would have used a template, a free template to build the presentation. And again, I can share that link. So I'll share the IG link to New Fire Festival's space or account online. I can share the link to the presentation site that I would have used to build this. And then the link to Thinkerific. And, there are many free things out there where you can schedule a training session with one of the representatives, to teach you how to put something together. And then think about what you would like to offer. And then think about people who might be interested in what you have to offer. So I saw somebody, I can't remember who it was, that said that she started teaching English, within this time. And you go to schools, if you know somebody on a parent-teacher board or something like that, or a teacher themselves, or you get an email address or phone number for schools, etc., or universities. I've reached out to different universities and said, I can teach this, I can teach that, and I've developed links with people in, Edinburgh who had me speak to their students about festivals, about event management in the Caribbean. So there are things out there. I think, again, once we have the time, we need to utilize our time wisely in looking at other opportunities to earn money, and use the members of your network. And this is why networking is so important, to build up your chance of being able to access new opportunities, and also think about getting out of your comfort zone. So again, looking at the skills that you might have that you didn't think were marketable because you just do it as part of what you do, but realizing that it may actually meet a challenge for somebody else that they're willing to pay you to meet that challenge, or fill a gap that they're willing to pay you to fill that gap. So I hope that answered your question, Viva. Right? Kevin said, I'm glad to see persons such as yourself pushing the ecological agenda. It is definitely a theme in many of my works. I have recently made an animation to promote the awareness of a huge impending ecological disaster in Molam Goa in India. Thank you, Kevin. And definitely, I would love to. So at the end of this, I have my email address. So if there are any things that you want to share with me, any additional questions that you have, that will be provided at the end of this, as well as you'll have that as reference when you get the presentation. Right, Janine is saying that you can use Zoom, Skype, and Google Video if you want to start teaching online, having workshops online, sharing content online. Yeah. All right, so let's look at our time. It's 4:53, so I know that in 7 minutes we're supposed to be getting into the networking session. Jackie, I don't know if there's anything you want to say at this point, because I will be staying on for part of that networking session, so we can continue the conversation there. But in terms of anything you want to see?
Not at the moment. We still have another 7 minutes, as you said, to get to the end of the session, and at that point we will take care of the feedback, and we'll have persons do the quiz as well. Okay. And then we will open up the session. Possibly, well, we have an hour, but we'll see how the session goes. That 1 hour session goes, and determine whether or not we will we will do the full 1 hour, or if it will be a little bit shorter than that. All
Okay.
right.
All right.
So
So let me,
we want to
I'm
give
gonna,
us
yeah,
oh,
sorry.
go.
I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so I can go online and get the different links. So guys, I'll put some of those links that I mentioned into the chat. So just give me, but feel free to continue sharing. The sharing has been really, really great whilst I do this.
And I believe I saw something about your IG handle as well.
Yes, yes,
Persons have been
yes.
asking you to share that, so this might be a good opportunity to do
Yes,
that.
will do. All right, so any other feedback, guys? I know we went through a lot. Okay, yes, Janine. Good question. Let me just put this link in here and I'll give you a very comprehensive response. All right, so NFF is Admin File World, right? And then I'm going to put the link that you could just click on. Right? Okay. All right, so Janine is asking, how do you go about reaching out to sponsorship for events? So again, this could be a project in itself, but it tends to be part of your larger project and definitely needs to come at the initial phases of your project cycle. So speaking from personal experience, what I've done for my own organization's projects as well as projects for other persons is that you really have to be very clear about what you're offering to the sponsor. But you also have to be clear about the nature of sponsorship and partnership and philanthropy in the Caribbean. And I'm saying that to say that based on experiences and conversations and work that I've done with persons in other places in the world, you tend to find that partners are really on board to see the vision realized. So you want to paint murals in a community to get kids involved in art, have positive messages in a physical way on walls in the community space, really uplift the community in different ways as a part of community outreach, which may be the project in itself or part of a larger project. And in many spaces, you might find a person or an organization is donating anonymously or very discreetly because they believe in the vision of doing that for the community. What I personally have found within the Caribbean, and more specifically in Trinidad and Tobago, is that when you're approaching organizations and corporate entities specifically, you tend to be put onto the marketing person or the corporate communications person. And what that does is that they are looking for value just as you're looking for value from them. The value that you want from them is financial, and the value that they want from you is visibility. So you tend to find that if you are going to a sponsor, a corporate sponsor, let's say a telecommunications company, I don't know, a hardware, an insurance agency, they want to know how their marketing agenda is going to be furthered by sponsoring your project, your initiative, your event. And what that tends to look like, and again, all of this I'm speaking from personal experience, what that tends to look like is branding on everything with their logo, at the event, in marketing materials, pre-event and post-event. So you have to be very clear about what you're willing to give to a sponsor in exchange for what you're asking them. All right. The way that we have gotten persons on board is through creating a really attractive proposal, finding who is the best person who would be amenable based on the nature of our work to supporting our work, and we get a contact for that specific person as far as possible. Cold calling definitely takes a lot more energy and is not always successful. It's very rarely successful. So you want to find out which department in an organization deals with sponsorships or partnerships. Who is the head, or who is the person who influences the head? And that is the person that you want to focus your attention on, or the team that you want to focus your attention on. When you are developing your proposal, you want to outline, just like you would have in the project charter, so you can pull some things from there, what the project is about, the qualifications of persons on the team to implement this project, if it's a new project. If it's a recurring project, your achievements in the past, um, maybe an outline of the budget. It really depends when it gets to that, but you definitely want to have a specific ask of, are we asking you for $5,000, $10,000, $100,000? And in exchange for that amount, what is it that we're going to give you? Is it going to be tickets to the event? Is it going to be logo placement at a particular size on specific branding material? Is it going to be a specific video that you can use as an organization to promote the partnership? So you have to think about all these things. But I think it is very, very clear, it is very critical for you as the organization to know what your expectation is going into asking a sponsor for money and what you're willing to give for the money that you're asking. So I hope that kind of helps. As I mentioned before, because the work that we do is really focused on environmentalism, going green, and sustainability, there have been people who have reached out to us offering money, and we have had to say no. Because from a brand perspective, from a value perspective, it just didn't align. There's no way that we could be talking about zero waste, and we're partnering with an entity that produces, plastic litter. So those are some of the hard decisions that you're going to have to make if you really want to stay true to your vision, if you're approaching your work with integrity. That's not saying that there are not compromises that you will make, because there are some organizations that were really poor environmental, really bad offenders in the past that are turning around because of pressure from their audience, enforcing them to go green. And they want to work with an organization that can help them do that. So then you can turn what may have been a negative for their brand into a positive. And they may actually pay you to do that. So even if you're a singer and some of your music is about, let's say, something happening in your community, you may be able to work with an organization based in that community to help a particular message go forward. So there are lots of different ways that we have to look at the arts not being a separate thing, but being integrated into life. Because culture is the way that we live. It's the food that we eat, it's the clothing that we wear, it's music we listen to, and all of that ties in. And all of that presents opportunities for revenue earning potentials for creators. But we just have to think about how we phrase things. All right, how we frame things and how we pitch it to potential partners. And I like to use the word partner versus sponsor because it frames things in a different way. Again, just giving you a little bit more from my experience. A lot of the times when we go to persons to work with us for the festival, it's not just about them giving us money. We want to tap into your network. So if you have a mailing list, if you do a blast, if you put things up, on social media, we want you to share our content. We want you to, send it out to your network. So it may not be that we're getting money from you, but when you evaluate the number of people that is going to reach because of the brand this organization has and the brand association you now get by working with them, that has returns. So I think, again, from that collaborative point of view, we really have to be looking at other ways we can succeed. All right. Thanks, Kevin, for following us. So Chris is asking where to start with contracts. Oh, okay. So we were really lucky in the earlies, and I know that we're going past, our 5 o'clock, well, our hour mark, Jackie. So I hope you can bear with me. I just want to answer these last questions. We were very lucky in our early starting point to connect with an organization called the Volunteer Center of Trinidad and Tobago. And they're a fantastic resource, and you may have different organizations like this that, can put you in touch formally and informally with professionals from different sectors. And we were able to connect with lawyers who actually worked with us based on agreements that we had and agreements that we needed to generate for the festival and for the work that we do. Additionally, there are lots of templates online. I think it's really important that as a creative, you take a look at what is going to be relevant for your own sector. So, again, things like copyright, intellectual property considerations, all of those things, just do a search and you can find a template, familiarize yourself, but you definitely want to have some kind of resource, which would be a legal person or entity that can provide some guidance when it comes to any agreement that you're going to sign until you get more familiar with what to look for in these types of agreements. I will say a lot of the time, people don't want to go to court. So a contract tends to be something that really outlines scope of work, responsibilities more than anything else, and what the benefits are going to be for either party, especially when we're talking about, creative projects. So for me, that's what I tend to put a lot of into my contract. So things are very clear regarding scope, if money is to be earned, who's, taking what percentage. And not so much, well, I'm using this as a yardstick that if you don't do one thing, we're going to go to court, So think about how you use contracts and what is going to be useful for you in terms of mobilizing a resource, whether it be a lawyer, maybe a volunteer, maybe a law student, somebody who can just give you advice when it comes to legalese, as I call it, And the same goes for finances and all of that, because we want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves, being vigilant, not being vigilant in the extreme, where we think everybody is out to get us, but definitely being mindful of what we need to protect when it comes to our creative group. All right. Alberta, so there's 2 more questions. Alberta is asking, what is the average turnaround time between making an initial contact with a sponsor and getting a response? Well, it has ranged from 2 days to 6 months. You really have to be prepared to be very persistent. And, watch your language when you're sending emails and things like that. You want to be very diplomatic. You want to be very positive. You don't ever want to degenerate into, any kind of negativity, because somebody who may not partner with you this year, if the brand grows or the project is successful, they might see merit in coming on board next year. And we've had that happen. People have told us no for one edition of the festival, and then they've said yes as the brand has grown. So you don't ever want to burn bridges as far as possible, but be prepared to put in time into, trying to find sponsors, because in several instances, it does take a lot of following up, staying on top of the conversations. And when you do have somebody say yes, you want to make sure that you are maintaining that relationship as positively as possible. So there's something called partner management, where you have to make sure that whatever you agree to is being honored, and they want to return as a partner year after year, project after project. So this is where communication, reporting, all of those things become very, very important, and transparency. All right. And finally, from Alberta, a local lawyer will know the nuances of the law in the particular jurisdiction. Agreed. And then crowdfunding. Personally, we have tried GoFundMe. It didn't really work locally. The only people we had donating were people outside of Trinidad and Tobago. So what has worked more for us, honestly, is value exchange. In looking for how we can manage our very, very limited budget. So where the funding has been able to cover certain things, we've been able to leverage the brand, leverage what we're trying to do, our vision, to have organizations come on board where they are providing services that we don't pay for that save us money, but they actually get benefits, whether it be free tickets to the festival, etc. Yeah. All right. So I think that's it for the questions at this point, and we're 9 minutes after the hour mark. So Jackie, if you want to jump in and let us know what's next.
Okay, great. Thank you, Elize, and thank you for that very informative session.
Thank you.
We
Thank
loved
you.
it. We loved it. And I see a lot of the questions coming through and a couple of comments there as well. So we know that persons have actually enjoyed and have learned from the session, right? So just as a reminder, we have finished this part of the training, but we still have a little way to go before we actually close out the session. We see those comments coming in. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. So yeah, we thank you for those wonderful comments. I told you it was going to be great, and I know Elize wasn't going to disappoint, and she surely did not at all. So great session. Okay, so earlier on I spoke about some of the well, that the digital creative training is one of the initiatives of the Catapult project or program, and I just want to give you an idea of some of the other courses that we actually cover in the digital creative training. So as you know, this session is project management for creatives. We also have digital marketing for creatives. We have a session on social media management for creatives. Protecting and benefiting from your intellectual property is another session. Managing your money, very important. You have to want to know how much is coming in and how much you're spending to make sure that you have some structure around that as well is also important, as well as e-commerce and online sales. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already done so, if you haven't already attended one of these other sessions, please get onto our website and register. These sessions are free, and they can position you in a very different kind of way. So as we strive through COVID and some of the challenges that brings. So I want to encourage you to get online. Now I'm going to drop the two links that I spoke about at the start of the session. One for the feedback for today's session, which, as I mentioned earlier, is very, very, very important for us. It's feedback from you that will help us to refine or to continue to refine these programs as we deliver them or bring them to you. And the second link is the link for the quiz, which is also very important. It's 5 questions, really not difficult. I just actually tested the link myself a while ago, and I literally closed my eyes and hit the buttons and got them right. So they're really very easy questions to answer. So
You muted yourself, Jackie.
right, so please feel free now to go ahead and to complete those. As you do that, we will be unmuting the mics. So we welcome now at this point any questions. You will be able to actually speak. You just need to unmute your mic, so you will be able to speak. You can engage the facilitator. You can engage other persons in the session if you so wish, and we will do that for a little while. All right, so as you complete the forms, we will be unmuting or getting you ready to have those open discussions for the next half an hour or so.
Lovely to see all your beautiful faces.
Hello.
Hi, Kevin.
Hello. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say, it was an interesting session. I don't really, since by the nature of the low budgets, I don't normally have a large team. I'm not able to have one. So, project management in kind of the larger scale is not generally an issue. Most of the times, people are doing almost totally different things. There's not like 10 animators that I need to manage. There's somebody who's kind of working independently doing sound. Somebody doing the live action portion. Like if it's like a video that has animation in it, somebody else will do the live actions sequence and so on. I mean, hopefully one day, but right now that's kind of just the scale of a lot of things that go on here in Trinidad, just out of necessity.
Absolutely.
Hopefully it could change, but that's where we are now. Yeah, and I mean, definitely there has to be a lot of work before they could really talk about making Trinidad a digital economy, because that is probably there's so many people that really desperate to sell their digital goods, especially in this time. But since since I've been involved in any creative sphere, well, I mean, I've always been doing it, but since I've kind of reached out to local people, and it hasn't really changed. Since I made our first film in probably, I think it was probably 2005 or so. And from since then to now, there hasn't been any development in terms of opening up the regulation so that Trinidad could access the things. In fact, it actually has gotten worse because they've removed certain methods. Like people used to be able to get Visa cards or something like that.
Yeah, the ATM card. Yeah.
Right. And many of the people that I mean, this might be a little off topic for project management, but it's an important part. Getting the money is a big part of the project. So and like small and micro businesses or nano business, I would call it a nano business, right? We aspire to be micro. We can't provide all this paperwork and regulation that the banks require. So you're basically saying that massy stores and me in a basement somewhere have to provide the same amount of paperwork to set things up. And I mean,
it's unrealistic to have that expectation. And I will tell you that part of what has been happening over the last 2-3 months that I at least have been involved in is talking to banks. So a group of us met with GMMB. We had other things set up which haven't happened quite yet, to kind of see how we can meet in the middle and have that understanding increase, so that we don't run into things like this, because the expectation really is unrealistic to say somebody at Massey's level has to provide the same thing that something, as you see, a nano enterprise has to provide. A lot of us are not finance people, not legal people. So in terms of having the documentation that is required, we learn that by force, but the support needs to be there. And this is where, for nano enterprises, for NGOs, for people within the creative sector, there have to be mechanisms where these services can be provided at realistic rates, accessible rates, so people don't have to be chief cook and bottle washer for their organization.
Yeah, even I mean, consider even obtaining the work is hard. So you want me to do all of this too, and I had a meeting a while back. an export TT, you know, and I mean, I'm sorry to say, it's a lot of lip service because
it
you
is.
you put in the cost, the how to say, the cart before the
The
horse.
cart before the horse. But I
You know,
think
you're
again,
talking
you
of.
know, I'm sorry to cut you, but again, given where we are at now, and this is not just in the Caribbean. I mean, we have very specific challenges in the Caribbean, but some of it is universal. So again, you know, my contacts in the UK and in the States and in Canada, they are also championing for support for the creative and cultural industries because you know, it's not there. So there would have been initial grants, definitely not anywhere close to what people were doing before, you know, from live events. Because remember, we also have to think about the creators of the product, but then you have the technicians, you know, because I'm sure that you would work with IT people, Kevin. For live events, we would have lighting persons, producers like Leslie and, you know, who does stage management and things like that. All those invisible elves that, you know, throw fairy dust and make the thing happen. Those people are out of work as well. So there definitely has to be a more fervent conversation, a more proactive approach to how we're not just recovering, but how we're creating more space for creatives to thrive in the Caribbean, especially now that we can work on developing our audiences, not just at home, but worldwide. Because people want our content. It's just what are the mechanisms in place for us to export them? Yeah. And thanks, Marsha. We enjoy having you. Thanks for letting us know Marsha had to leave. All right, I see Kareen's mic is unmuted and Glendon's is unmuted. Thank you so much, Janine. If anybody else wants to share, you might be caught up in doing your feedback for your surveys, that's fine. Your quiz. Try to make it very easy.
Yes,
I suppose persons are actually completing
exactly.
their forms. You see
but I'm hearing a voice.
Yes, it's Glenda Rosalie.
Hi, Glenda. How are you?
I'm great. I know that a lot of us are concerned about this whole new norm that we are talking about. And I think that as creators, and if you know, well, I know you know a lot about me, I guess. And you know, I'm both an administrative person and also a creator.
Yes.
And I think that we have, and I'm saying this given my age, I'm already in my 50s. It is the new norm, and we have to find ways and means to navigate this space. As creators, we have to. We can butt our heads and quarrel from now, no matter how much things COVID might slightly go away, we might find a key or something. But so long as we entered into this space which we already kind of in the digital space already before COVID, it is not going to fully change back. So even though COVID will away, it is not going to, the digital space will be existing in much more dynamic ways than it was before. So I think I want to say that creators, especially, we have to put our heads down, participate in things like what Catapult is doing, seeing how we can find a way to be able to apply our trade still to ensure that we are not left behind. And we have to support each other, you know, since this thing, I'm seeing so many other things happening on Facebook. You're seeing so many persons out there reaching out. And I think that is where it is important that we keep ourselves active on these platforms to ensure that we don't miss out on some of the things that can help us to move further along. And that is, because I mean, all the projects that I do for the Tobago House of Assembly, all those projects, I had to change it into a virtual space.
Yep,
I am
yep.
doing Calypso History Month now. I'm doing a vintage Calypso impersonation competition online. They have to go on the virtual space. I am doing lectures. I have Dr. Liverpool, all of them online.
Right.
They,
Yes,
doing a
yes.
Zoom pre-recording and then putting it out there because this is what we have to do, whether we like it or we don't.
Yeah.
And I just want everybody to keep it, just be encouraged, it will happen.
Yeah, and you have to give yourself the time to get on board, Some things will take longer than others. But
Yeah.
Glenda, can I ask you what, if any, have been some of the major challenges, but also some of the major achievements with having to transition to the virtual space?
Okay. It might sound very strange, but when this whole COVID thing, when we lockdown now started, I had to think, being the person in charge of culture in Tobago, I had to start to think, because I was in the midst of doing a lot of projects, because we always doing programs.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God, what to do and how do I get the star? So it was like we just went into a lull. And then, strangely enough, I am the one who started seeing the space differently. So my staff, who happen to be much younger than I am, up to now, I am getting challenges trying to tell them, no, remember, we have social distancing. No, we don't go. So we did Republic Day, and we did our virtual concert, we did Independence, we did a virtual, we saw Heritage, I guess. I heard somebody talk about Heritage.
Yeah, it was very well done.
And exactly, and this is what I have, and the younger ones are those are the ones, because they're so accustomed with the whole lime and the big party and all the big artists being right here. So you have to also, that is where the challenge, it still lies there, but I think gradually they are getting it, because every time I tell them I'm not signing off, right, like if COVID exists. I say if it changes, we can change it, because we knew what to do before. But I say any proposal going forward, right, with social distancing in mind and COVID protocols. As it pertains to the pros now, for me, I can say for me, I think I am being able to sit back and see now how much opportunities exist out of the normal Trinidad and Tobago space. Because I'm not so busy having every 2 minutes to run and erect a big project for how much thousands of people. Now, but instead now I'm more dealing with the virtual and working more in connectivity with the communications department, the IT. I have time to focus now and look at what is happening in Jamaica, what is happening in Grenada, what is happening here, and also make connections. So that global, that world village, as it pertains to the creative arts, is not open up. So now I am telling my staff and telling other creatives, actually those persons out there in the arts, like the calypsonians, the performing and dancers, look at this, look at that. There's a certain links to them. So they are now seeing more things. So I think that gives us an opportunity to sit back and understand we are not the only ones creating. And I think that is what most of the creatives in Trinidad and Tobago needed to understand. They have so many great things happening out there. Also, that is where that's where we are, and I'm happy that I'm not happy that COVID happened. I'm happy that we are more able to connect. I mean, I guess I probably might not have even known about Catapult hadn't it, so I'm happy about that. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Glenda.
No problem. Thank you, and it was a great presentation. I will be linking up with you. Don't worry.
Excellent. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Glenda, did you want to say something? I was hearing another voice. I thought it was Glenda. Mengivo, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I put a link in the chat. Just I did a quick search and found the site with contract templates. So hopefully you can use that as a launch point. But definitely you want to take a look at what is out there, see what might work best for you as a creative. definitely, I know somebody who raised the point of considerations we have to make operating in the digital space now regarding rights to content and all of that. We want to make sure that as professionals, we are using content properly, having people use our own content properly, and there may be legal ramifications for that. So definitely we want to do some additional reading around sharing content in the virtual space. All right. Thank you, Brandon.
Yeah, we see those comments coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Great presentation. That's Glendon.
Right, so we're at 5:30 now.
Right, and Leslie saying, well said, Glenda.
Mm-hmm. My grandma
Right.
is always so passionate.
Yes.
A real force to be reckoned with in Tobago.
Oh, you need to say a Trinidadian that is a
I know, well,
force to
I didn't
reckon
want to go there. I didn't want to go
with.
there.
It's a big one. Yeah, you need to say that. So I have the best
Yeah,
of two worlds.
exactly, exactly. Representing us both well.
Yes. So I'm sorry I have to leave now.
No problem.
Okay, but thanks again and
Thanks
see
for your
you on.
contribution, Glenda. I
Thank
look
you.
forward to connecting, all right? So
Yes,
stay
yes.
safe and keep good.
You all also, all of you all.
Thank you.
Okay, we can see a show of raised hands. The number of persons who are still completing the forms,
Hmm.
either of the two forms.
Brennan saying it's very sister a trick.
So just raise your hands.
All right, so Olivia said both completed.
Yes, thank you, Olivia, for that.
Aisha completed. All right, so Kevin is
Okay,
promising to do it. Thanks,
right, Kevin,
Kevin.
we saw that.
Imani, great job.
Thank you, Kevin. We look out for that.
Alberta
Okay.
has completed. So that's 1, 2, 3. So far, Jackie, I have 4 people confirming via the chat that they've completed, and Kevin said he will do it after his meeting.
Right, right. Well, I don't believe there was anybody who was still, except for maybe one person that said they were still completing.
Okay.
So I think we'll just wait a little bit and see.
Janine has
Uh,
completed, Lebanon completed.
hmm,
Deandra is done. Right, so I haven't seen anything from Kareem, Chris, Leslie, did Natasha say anything? No. Definitely else. Right, and Jackie, I will PDF my presentation once we get off and email that to you so you can click
great,
it.
great. I'll share once I have it. I'll share a copy with the persons who attended today.
Nice, thank you.
Right, so let me just.
Did you share your email too, or was it
Yeah, so
pasted above?
that will be in the presentation, but I can drop it. Let me drop it in the chat here.
Thank you, Glendon. Stay safe as well. Is there anybody else that's still completing the forms? I think it's safe to say at this point that everybody has completed the forms, both forms. So at this point, just making sure no raised hands or anything. Yes. Yeah, I want to believe everybody has completed. So at this point, I just want to extend another thank you, Elize, for today's session. It was very informative, and it's quite evident that persons enjoyed the session. So thanks a lot for that. And I want to thank the attendees as well for joining. You were all good sports, dropping your messages and your comments and your questions in the chat. So thank you for adding to the overall experience of today's session. Of course, we want to know that the information that you have received, that you'll be able to apply it in your day-to-day life and in the various things that you do as it relates to your work. So application is very important. We do hope that you will be able to utilize the information that way as well. It's just one thing to get the knowledge, but being able to apply it and use it, put it to good use is it's really where you want to take it to. And so we do hope that you will be able to apply some of what you've learned today. Remember now, we do have other sessions. If we would love to have you, see you, although I see some familiar faces and names.
Yeah, Janine says she's done 3 already.
Yes,
Good on you, Janine.
Yes, I've seen Janine a few times in our sessions. We are happy to have you. We want to encourage other persons to sign up for other sessions. We have just one full rotation left to complete. Well, in our English versions anyway, because we are offering the sessions in foreign languages as well. So just another full rotation of all 6 sessions starting next week. So there's not a lot of time to benefit from this great opportunity. Continue to stay safe, and I'm going to say have a good afternoon until I see you again in one of our next sessions.